And good evening. This is the Tech Travel Geeks podcast, now at episode number 20. Welcome back, Lukasz. How are you?
I'm great. How are you doing today?
Very well, thanks. It's been a busy week, but I'm finally free to podcast again after a few weeks of completely missed editing, publishing, and actually podcasting. So it's good to be back.
Indeed.
And today, we have decided to have yet another guest. In our 20th episode, we decided to have a special guest, one who really knows his stuff about podcasting and also about microphones. So please welcome to the Tech Travel Geeks podcast, Vlad Savov of The Verge. Good evening, Vlad.
Good evening, guys. And I should mention, I don't know my stuff about podcasting and microphones. I'm learning my stuff about podcasting and microphones. Please.
Well, let's put it this way. You probably know a lot more than we do, especially considering I recently upgraded to an Amazon Basics microphone.
No, you didn't do that.
I did. So
what did you upgrade from? A tin can?
No, I went from a USB condenser microphone, which served me well for years. I believe it was originally about £16 sterling. That's approximately $20 on Amazon, and worked well for me. So this year I have upgraded to the Amazon Basics USB condenser microphone, which I can say works well in noisy environments such as Brewdog pubs. So,
have you guys done a podcast from there?
I have, yes. And in a noisy environment, it has a sort of wide mode for multi-people, multi-sound sources, which seems to work.
Oh, fair enough.
I'll send you the link one day. But I hear you've published something recently about podcast microphones. Tell us more about it, Vlad.
Well, I just published a review of the HiFi mic, the Apogee HiFi mic, which I'm using right now, and I am genuinely hyped about this mic. The name is true. I'll just lift it up gently and try not to disturb it. So this is it. It comes with this pop filter, and it comes with this tripod, which when you squeeze it up, it turns into a handle, right? It turns into a really great hand grip. And just putting it back down again. This is terrific because I'm one of those people who just doesn't like reading manuals and doesn't like developing any sort of skill or needing to develop a skill in order to use a piece of technology. And this thing, it comes with a Lightning, USB-A, USB-C cable in the box. It has a really small container. Well, it's not a container, it's a box. Okay, it's a nylon case. It's about the size of the same case size as the Sony 1000X noise cancelling headphones that Lukasz is wearing right now. So we have context right there. And it's just effortless, right? I plugged it in via USB-C into the laptop, my MacBook Pro. Works straight away, automatically recognized. It works with Mac, Windows, Android, even though it's not listed as working with Android, but also iOS devices. And it's the sort of thing, I used to do podcasts 5 or 6 years ago. I think it's 2013 that I stopped doing the Verge Mobile show regularly. And one of the reasons was that I was using the massive, gargantuan, heavy blue Yeti mic. Okay, and which was a failure on all sorts of usability points. It's great on quality, but failure on usability because it is about yay tall. So if I was talking to you with that microphone, we'd be doing this. Hello. It could pivot down in order to store it, so it's a bit shorter. But when it does that, the cable plugging into the bottom of it has to be disconnected. And a lot of the time I will be like, okay, I'm finished with this podcast. I try and pivot it down, but I haven't disconnected the cable, and the cable gets trapped into the stand. And it's a mini USB plug, which nobody freaking uses this century or shouldn't use this century. And that got loosened up, right? Because mini USB, micro USB, they're really quite flimsy. So now I'm like, I need to keep the cable plugged in because the thing got loosened. But in order for me to keep it plugged in, I have a 2-meter tall structure, which is supposed to be my microphone. So after a while, it just got really frustrating. And I was like, okay, this is too much work. And this HiFi mic thing is amazing because it also has a built-in compressor, which I'm using right now. A compressor, me being a photo geek, I think is a bad thing because it compresses dynamic range, but it's actually a good thing in audio because if I start talking more quietly, it kind of picks that up. And if I get super excited about something, it reins that in, so I never become too shouty. So there you go. You don't even need to read my review anymore because I just gave you the Hype Mic review. But I am pretty excited about this. It's a really good microphone.
Excellent. Can it make up for situations where helium is in high quantity in the room you're in?
No, I'm
No.
afraid it doesn't make up for situations where your decision making is terrible.
No, that's great. No, I'm just saying that because I recently listened to a podcast by Rose Eveleth, the Flash Forward podcast, and there was a fantastic episode about exploration of space, and also the fact that exploration of the oceans and the bottom of the oceans was a thing, with submarine bases that were built. And obviously, to maintain temperatures and pressurization in those submarine bases, they had to fill them with helium at the time. And when journalists were phoning up the subnauts to speak to them, they thought it was prank calls because of the helium in the centers and the voices that were going back through to the journalists. So it's just a bit of fun, but that's good to hear that this is your preferred.
Like I say, this microphone does not account for bad decision making. I mean, come on. It's like this might turn into a rant, and I'm going to restrain myself from ranting. But when people do that kind of thing, climb the highest mountains, go into places where us land mammals are not supposed to be, I just don't think that's reasonable, rational decision making. Okay, so I'm perfectly okay with them having freaky voices and whatever else. They should be signals that a human is not in a natural environment, right?
Yes,
I'm okay with that.
But that's great. So we'll not make up for those decisions. Sadly, that was an era of not space exploration that we learned a lot of as a human race, but sadly was shut down, arguably prematurely. Shout out to Rose here. We hope to have her on the podcast soon. So we've had an introduction, very short introduction to Vlad and to his current preferred microphone. Vlad, tell us about yourself. Who is Vlad Savov?
Oof. Okay, that's a loaded question. I'm a Bulgarian who migrated to London. As an immigrant kid, I didn't think that fun jobs were going to be for me. I was confident that I'll have one of those shitty jobs that everybody hates and just goes into 9 to 5 and then goes home and plays some nice video game and escapes. I ended up with a job that occupies more of my time, and now I can't even play any more video games. But the reason my job occupies so much of my time is because of passion. And it was a complete fluke, as far as I'm concerned, that I got into this. Technology journalism always seemed like something other people would do. But back in 2009, I was, for whatever reason, watching The Apprentice in the UK. And I'm sorry about that. It's, again, bad decision making, man. But I was watching that show and I was thinking, these people are atrocious. They're the worst human beings that you could dredge up from the UK to present as like our young, promising new generation of entrepreneurs, right? But then I thought, okay, so I think I'm better than these guys, right? But they're on a TV show. They're putting themselves forward. And some of them ended up doing other things. Some of them ended up winning the show. And I just felt a little bit of frustration with my own being judgmental, but at the same time not taking the action that they're taking, right? It's like I'm better than them, but I'm sitting around being better anonymously. At about the same time, Engadget just listed, and I was an avid reader of Engadget at the time, they just listed a thing saying, we need writers in Europe. London would be an ideal location. And then I was like, okay, I think I know how to write. I have a passion for tech. I am in London. And if all of these jerk faces can get on TV with their job applications, why don't I just send off a random email to Engadget? And, this is where I'm going to sound big-headed, but I am actually a very good writer. And that was recognized by the Engadget people, for which I'm still very grateful to them for. And it's one of the things, I do a lot of complaining about the web and the effects of large corporations like Google and Facebook and Amazon and so on. But it's one of the things that I credit the web for. It's the fact that it gave me that chance. It was the fact that, my name might get in the way of me getting some jobs here in London because some people are super old-fashioned about it, and you have all these hierarchies and sclerotic structures of class and so on. But being on the web, my name didn't matter. They were like, can this guy blog about technology, and will he be up at 1 a.m. and 2 a.m. covering, events in the States? And obviously the answer was yes. So that's what happened. I got hired in Engadget. Then we had a big exodus in Engadget a couple of years later. And all the people with whom I had trained and learned so much, who trained me over those 2 years, basically were like, we're going to go and do another thing. And I'm like, but guys, this was our thing. Why are you doing another thing? Like, I bust my ass for 2 years. I wrote like more than 3,000 posts for Engadget. The last 18 months, I was averaging more than 150 posts per month. And I was paid on a per post basis. So it's basically, if I want to get paid, I got to write. And again, I feel like if you do that for a couple of years, like I did, that's perfect, because it's great training. It means you have discipline. It means you have your own motivation to do the work and to come up with stories and angles and so on. If you do it for longer 2 years, it's exploitation, right? Like 2 years training, great. So yeah, then we started The Verge because I was like, okay, everybody who I respect in this industry works at this new thing. I'm just gonna go join them. So I joined when it was still This Is My Next, and then it became The Verge. And since then, just fast forward, I've been doing a ton of smartphone reviews. Then I got into headphones, so now I'm doing headphone reviews. We're not yet doing avocado reviews, but when we get to that stage, I'll be first in line to do those reviews.
That's great. And so you're now at The Verge, this organization which is arguably one of the biggest tech publications that covers not only technology, not only consumer electronics, but also sort of science, culture. It's more than just tech. It's more than just consumer electronics. And you seem to have found a very nice niche in there. As you just told us, you've just finished doing some reviews of microphones. What other things, apart from microphones, do you cover for The Verge?
I mean, come on, apart from microphones. Microphones are like 0.5% of my coverage.
Indeed. That's why I'm asking you.
Well, as I say, I do a lot of complaining, right? I just finished up another podcast where we're talking about voice activated and voice first devices, looking into things like Amazon Alexa, Google Assistant, and so on. And I spent most of my time basically bitching about the need for regulation of these things and just the privacy invasion that's inherent in them, the wrong incentives, the fact that you can't trust Facebook to keep anything private, like literally anything. And the dumbness of anybody paying actual money to put an always listening device like Facebook Portal in their home, channeling stuff to Facebook. And I think that's part of a tech journalist's role and responsibility. Apple, Google, etc. The bigger the company is, the better their marketing department is, right? So if there's a positive message to get out about Apple is taking care of that job. Okay, but everything has its pros and cons. Everything has its ups and downs. So I don't need to tell you what's good about Apple's products. Apple does that job, or Google, right? For the most part. I need to tell you where the pitfalls are. I need to tell you why buying a HomePod and locking yourself into the Apple ecosystem might not be the best advice for you, or the most advisable course of action. I need to tell you how, if you use Chrome, Android, and you allow Google's location history tracking, you literally don't have a moment in your life that Google doesn't know what you're doing. And I need to tell you that, hey, there's browsers like Brave, which are based on the same thing as Chromium, and they do the same job, but they don't feed all your info to Google. So maybe, just maybe, diversify your shit, right? So it's that kind of thing. It's like being a technology journalist is kind of like being a politics journalist in Brexit era Britain, right? Everything is touched by it. Everything is touched by it. So it's literally, if it's got tech in it, I'm interested in it, and I try and write about it. And some people might say I'm a contrarian because I do like to be a little bit provocative with my headlines, especially. But I also feel like it's not worth saying the common wisdom, right? If it's common wisdom, if it's common sense, if it's well known, why am I spending time on it?
That makes sense. Lukasz, what are your views on that?
Now, I was just wondering if there's any individuals in this world who actually have the Facebook portal. I've never heard of anyone having it. Is it available in the UK, and do people use it?
Vlad, are you aware of that?
I'm very hopeful that nobody's bought Facebook portal. At the same time, there are plenty of dumb people out in the world, so I'm confident that somebody has.
So I know for a fact that in the UK, Facebook portal is not open, and the Facebook portal SDKs that they were trying to set up
no,
for
I'm sorry,
users.
just no.
Yeah.
Listen, they can say it's not open. I don't care. Look, if there's one thing I want everybody to take away from this podcast, it is do not trust Facebook. I do not care what they say to you. I do not care if they tell you it's private. I do not care if they tell you it's a wall. There's not even a door. No, there is a door, and it's not even a door. It's a gateway. It's just a archway, right? And just people go in and out of it. Facebook does not protect your privacy. Facebook does not care about your privacy. The evidence is out there. Just Google Facebook and privacy. Oh, don't Google. Use DuckDuckGo. I don't care what source you go. Facebook is trash. You should quit it. You should cancel it. You should get it out of your life. I think I've been clear about that.
That's a beautiful rant. And to any of you watching this video embedded on YouTube, take that as a signal. You might want to use a better social network with a much healthier group of consumers who comment lovelily on you, just like YouTube. Is that right, Vlad?
I mean, if you're gonna say better than Facebook, yeah, definitely better than Facebook, right? At least the Nazis on YouTube are honest with you, whereas Facebook, you get lies as well. I mean, okay, Facebook advertising. The rare occasions when I've actually been to Facebook, there is just the most ridiculous stuff. It's like Graham Norton, popular UK talk show host, is pictured with like marks on his face, and there's like a headline shown on a tabloid, and he's had a car crash or some shit. It's like, that's a complete lie. That's a total fabrication. And they take some other celebrity and they present him, and there's like somebody makes a confession, and that's an ad, but it's presented as a tabloid headline, tabloid front page, and just sitting on the side of your Facebook newsfeed. I'm like, how is this allowed to be presented? And again, it's because Facebook's priorities are not your well-being. I don't even think Google's priorities are in any way the user's well-being, but Facebook is especially craven about these things. It's especially like, there is no dirty dollar that Facebook will not take. They will just, yeah. It's a terrible social network. It's not even a social network. Like, nobody socializes on it. Research has been done, and Facebook and one of Facebook's prime products, Instagram, are bad for people's mental health. Again, this is not just me ranting uncontrollably, which I love to do, but it's people have done the research.
Very good. Obviously, I'll ask you for the links to some of that research, and we'll add it to
now you're giving me a job. I'm not going to work at it. I'm serious though. Like,
I'm sure I've read those reports as well. There's lots of different studies around the world, and also the experimentation practices. Facebook have actually boasted about some of the experimentation they've performed on their platform with people's, I wouldn't say mental health, but their mood settings, as in to see if they could affect their state of mind. And that's just testament to how powerful these are for the average consumer that isn't aware of how it actually works and what happens. So yeah, I agree. I'm not a fan of Facebook, but sadly, that is the method of communication I have with many friends and family who don't use much else other than that. And even when they do, they're not using Facebook, they're using Instagram or they're using WhatsApp. So either way, you are part of their ecosystem. Even if you use Brave browser and you're you try and stay off the radar. So Vlad, you mentioned Brave browser, and I read your coverage and how you switched over on the Verge. Had you considered any other browsers with privacy in mind? Were there any other ones that stood out to you?
Well, I try to play around with all of them, basically. I know Safari makes privacy an important aspect, but at the same time, I have been using Android devices since the release of the original Google Pixel. Reason being cameras. We could dive into that a bit more later. So Safari is very much, if you're in the Apple ecosystem and you're happy with it, and you're happy being ensconced in that, nothing wrong with that. But if you're happy with that, use Safari. Like, that would be my tip. Like, I'm using a MacBook Pro right now. If I was using Safari, its battery life performance relative to the Brave browser would be so much better. But it's locked down to Apple devices. I tried Vivaldi, which is again based on Chromium. I tried Opera, which is also based on Chromium. Firefox. Microsoft Edge is going to have a Chromium version, which, you know, if that matures nicely, I wouldn't have any issue. I have zero loyalty to anybody offering these services. And I think that's how we should be, right? These companies, the larger the company is, the more likely it is to be exploiting you. So you should have zero loyalty or whatever to them. And let's not even get into the tax situation with all of them, right? All of the tax dodging and tax havens or whatever. That being said, on topic, Vivaldi is good, and it's actually the most customizable browser literally ever. Okay?
I'm glad you're saying that, because that is my daily driver browser. I use Vivaldi mainly because I was attracted to it when they launched, because of the fact that this was a group of engineers and product people from Opera, one of the biggest browser companies ever, who decided to do a startup called Vivaldi, which really took me to the heart just because of their company name. And then the more I used it, the more I really started appreciating the customizability, the fact that you can use Chrome plugins, which are unrelated to other companies. And just, it's a more geeky but more complete experience for someone like myself. And I was surprised to hear that, Lukasz, you hadn't heard about them until a few weeks ago when I sent you a screenshot of a notification.
Yeah, I've not been too familiar. However, I used Opera all the time, years and years ago. Opera was my number one, I think, because of the tab handling. I'm infamous in my workplace for having like 50 tabs at all times, and I think Opera was doing me a favor with that. I do have a question though, Vlad. What do you use on mobile? I think there's different browsers there. Any recommendations for mobile?
I also use Brave. It still has its syncing system in beta mode right now, but it creates a sync chain, it calls it. So it syncs between my Windows desktop, my MacBook Pro, and my Android device, whichever one it is at the time. Again, it's pretty much like Chrome. It does pretty much the same job. They recently did an update for the Brave mobile browser where the little icons at the bottom, you could disable them, so you have the whole screen now. That works really well for me. It's really simple, really stripped back. And the thing that I really like about Brave, and it's actually the reason I'm using it ahead of Vivaldi, which I agree with Matteo on every point about them, is that it has a built-in ad blocker and tracker blocker. And it's subtle enough that websites don't recognize it. They don't recognize it as additional ad blocker software. So if you go to some of the more notorious websites which don't even let you get into them with an ad blocker, such as I think it's Forbes and a couple of others, they don't recognize it. They don't give you that, oh, please disable your ad blocker because blah, 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 blah. Right. So I like that. I'm also should just address the fact that I work for a website which makes its money from advertising and is technically supposed to hate ad blockers and whatever. I see no conflict in that. I am making money out of ads right now. That's what pays my bills. But I'll be perfectly happy if all of this stuff goes to shit and then we rebuild, because I'm still going to be a tech journalist. People are still going to want tech reviews, and we find some other way to fund it. Honestly, it's like, the situation right now in any sort of advertising business is Google and Facebook own that. Okay, they're a duopoly, and they suck all the revenues out of the business. And anybody trying to survive on ads is kind of living a fancy lifestyle, which includes the people at the top of my organization. That's just my perspective. Okay, and I know, for example, with Apple News, people doing subscriptions. Fox Media, which is the parent company of The Verge, they're doing some stuff with Vox.com, feeding into the Apple News subscription, and they're developing some sort of membership services. I am just completely ignorant about this, so I'm not revealing any insider information for you guys. And I think that's actually the future for these things. I know there's the Young Turks, which is an American progressive political YouTube channel. They live on subscriptions. Like, that's the whole thing, is people support their point of view and they want to see more of that promoted, and people fund them. Sam Harris, the famous atheist slash well, atheist. Okay, that's as much description I could give him. Well, he does a meditation app as well. Public philosopher, let's say. He used to be on Patreon, now he's not. And again, he makes his money from podcast listeners supporting him directly. Now they support him directly via his website. And he also does live events. And I think that looking into alternative ways to fund all of these things is a constructive thing. And I don't think that ad-supported anything is particularly good or healthy for people.
I agree. As in, with the web to this point historically has been ad-supported. It's been coming and going in phases, but it's still the main business model for a lot of publications, for a lot of outlets. What I was interested to hear is when you set up The Verge, you had a clear separation, a demarcation between the editorial team, the team that was writing and making the content, and the business side of the company that was selling the ad slots, was selling the commercial side of it, so as that you, the writers, are influenced as little as possible by the economic dynamics around your business.
Yeah,
and that was something that I remember listening to Joshua Tospolsky discussing, not only on The Verge but also at Bloomberg, trying to say that there should have been this sort of clear demarcation to avoid any potential conflict of interest.
that's true. That's still the case.
Yes, and that's I would say ethically a very good way of going about things. So that's really interesting, that sort of moving into the economics of it all and hearing your browser choices, your views on the monetization of the platforms we work with. Vlad, you did also mention Edge and the fact that they are now working on a Chromium version of Edge.
Yeah.
On that note, shout out to Chris Haleman, who's the program manager at Microsoft of browsers and open web. I met Chris at a developer conference a few years ago, and we did our best to drink the bar drive gin. He was at Mozilla at the time, but he is one of those thought leaders in the space who is actually working on making a company like Microsoft a better, in a way, more web standards compliant company on the web, considering how potentially negative their history was with products like Internet Explorer, who still to this day give Lukasz and I a bit of a twitch when we think about web development and product development for the web.
Yeah, don't mention that.
No, guys, this is a podcast. We have to mention it. Please tell me more.
Yeah, so Lukasz for the last few months has been working on an internal product that we will be using ourselves and that some of our partners will be using. Yeah. And the first day Lukasz was feeling confident enough to send me the product to play around with, he sent me the link, and within 30 seconds I said, hey, it doesn't work. Why? Because it wasn't one of two browsers. The open web, the web standards, how you produce products for these platforms is very, very challenging from a technological standpoint. And the amount of work that needs to be redone to support them is very complicated. So despite Edge being a very web standards compliant browser from a technical standpoint, it's still not compatible with all the frameworks and tooling that has been built mainly to target browsers like Firefox, Chrome, and Safari. If it's not one of those three engines, most browsers won't be able to handle products. So I use for work on my work machine. My work browser is Microsoft Edge, mainly because I have an understanding that many of the partners that I work with on a day-to-day basis, they have no choice in terms of browsers. They'll work in large corporations where the default browser bundled with the operating system is the one they're allowed. There are security concerns around what our partners have access to in terms of data. Therefore, there's that security lockdown. And yes, it's quite a headache, one that's is frustrating for those creating the content from a technical standpoint.
Yeah, it's been a fun journey. I tested the tool end to end on two browsers, Firefox and Chrome, and it worked perfectly until Matteo threw a spanner, which was Microsoft Edge. So now I'm reworking the issues. So yeah, it's fun.
We know that it's not just your issue, Lukasz. Obviously, you're trying to use existing tooling so as to not have to reinvent the wheel. And that's part of the issues of dynamics of building browsers and building the web.
I mean, he's saying it's a fun journey and he's smiling, but I'm confident that he's lying with both of those things.
Well, when he turns up late for work because he spent the night reworking on a feature to try and get it ready, it is quite frustrating. And it is one of the reasons the Tech Travel Geeks podcast has not been on for a while, is in we've been very busy in the day job. But anyway, that's all coming to a head soon. Hopefully, if you work in the travel industry and you work with us, you will be able to start using Lukasz's amazing tool. I wonder if there's any Easter eggs in it, Lukasz?
I was thinking of something for the 1st of April, but there's no users, so it would have been a useless joke. It's like
that one user is still complaining about it not working on Microsoft Edge.
Yeah. So yeah, next year there will be an April Fool's joke. Any interesting April Fools you found, Vlad, this year?
I have actively avoided them.
Yep.
My take on April Fools is that it's a good day to remember just how much skill and practice it takes to be a good comedian, and the fact that it is a profession, it is a job, and we should respect comedians, and we should not try to be them for one day out of the year and embarrass ourselves like this. Honestly, it's basically the comedic equivalent of people going on a basketball court one time out of the entire year and just saying, hey, I'm wide open because you should pass me the ball, right? And being like, I'm Steph Curry, guys, half court 3-pointers. I got it. I got this. Just pass me the ball. It's like, no, my friend, no.
That's exactly how you end up walking off the basketball court with some staved fingers and a bruised ego. For me, it's very frustrating having to walk into each meeting on the 1st of April and preface anything in the meeting as, this is not an April Fool's joke meeting, and I will not be making any jokes during this session.
Sorry, I just lost you guys for a second, but I think I'm back now.
Okay, good. We can definitely hear you. So, Vlad, Bulgarian in London. So we were joking about Bulgaria, Poland, and Italy, 2 tricolors, 1 bicolor, as in referring to our flags. The next time we have Vlad on the Tech Travel Geeks podcast, we definitely need to get a Hungarian person on it as well. And luckily, we do know quite a few Hungarian people. Lukasz and I used to have a lot of Hungarian colleagues, and still do, in our Budapest office. So it'd be good to have 3 tricolors and a bicolor at the next podcast.
And the convenient thing is, Hungary, Bulgaria, and Italy, we're all using the same tricolors: white, red, and green.
Yeah.
Right. So if you're a bit colorblind, we can invite an Irishman on as well. That'll be fine. Close enough.
We can invite Tika, who's Indonesian. She is white, red and white, so she's the opposite of the Polish flag. Tika, you met in Barcelona, so we can do a bicolor, and tricolor instead, Matteo.
Yes, let's get some division into this. Like, what this podcast is really missing, honestly, guys, is a bit of conflict.
And who better to bring that conflict than Tika? No, I'm just joking. we love Tika, and she is our boss. And Tika, we wait to have you on the Tech Travel Geeks podcast soon to talk travel, tech, and also.
Wait, you got me on the podcast before her?
Yes.
That's an achievement. Well, congratulations.
Thank you. Tika, who today was messaging me saying how much she is wanting to have a new smartphone, one that both you and I, Vlad, have been using for over a week now, and that has pretty good camera when it comes to, oh my goodness, you have the Amber Sunrise one.
Oh, you don't need to do the brand name, but yes, this is the gorgeous one.
Okay, wow. So Vlad, explain this to me. The colors of the Huawei P30 Pro, the smartphone we're talking about.
Yeah, I can't explain the brand name of the color.
Come in Breathing Crystal. That's the one I'm holding. Yes. Amber Sunrise.
Let's do this. Let's do this and just really piss off Lukasz because he doesn't have one.
Yes. And Aurora. Now, let's clarify. These are aspirational brand names, but if you think about it, they fit in perfectly as porn star names.
I did not think about that until you mentioned that.
Breathing Crystal, Amber Sunrise, and Aurora.
I mean, fair enough.
And black. Let's face it, black counts as well. So this is very amusing, but the colors, the shininess of these devices is, I would say, the cherry on the pie with regards to the product itself. I have been blown away by the camera when it comes to zoom. We discussed this on All About Androids this week on the Twit network. And Vlad, we quoted your article on the use of the Huawei P30 Pro in low light. That was a really, really cool article you did, and I really like the Verge's sliders for direct comparison of images.
Well, those are my sliders, they're not the Verge's. I put them together. I did the work.
Well done. How did you do that? What is that?
Well, actually, we have a really good tool, so I didn't have to do much work. Yeah, no, the sliders are a really kick-ass thing. It's part of our CMS, and I try to exploit that as often as I can. Well, it was a shock to me as well. Okay, so the context that's necessary here is to say that Google's Nitesite mode is something that was revolutionary as recently as 6 months ago, right? October time when Google came out with it. It literally gave the Pixel cameras night vision. Okay, like I'm struggling for words because the default position up until last autumn was a smartphone at nighttime is gonna see black with a little outline, a little bit of light, and maybe you can get some arty photo out of that, right? In low light, but basically it's not a low light camera. If you want a low light camera, it's got to be big and chunky, right? It's got to be a DSLR. It's got to have a big sensor because how do you get more light in? Larger sensor, larger lenses, etc., etc. Google just broke that expectation, and it did that with a lot of computational photography. Nitesite requires usually 3 or 4 seconds to get multiple exposures, stack them together. And once it stacks them, it produces a cleaner image by doing a lot of really clever mathematics. I'm using mathematics just to be fair to Americans and English people, because if I say math, English will get pissed off at me. If I say maths, Americans are going to be like, why? Whatever. Anyway.
Yeah. But I appreciate the fact that you used mathematics in the plural, because we know that's the correct one.
See, you're getting me in trouble. I am literally trying not to be in trouble with any camp, and you're like, yep, put your foot in it. I will not. That's your foot in it, not mine. Okay, so Nitesite blew me away, and I wrote, I don't know, 3 or 4 articles just celebrating that fact, showing examples, explaining it to people. I clashed with some just iPhone fanatics who are like, okay, that's impressive and everything, but you know, it's night and it should be dark, and the iPhone shows a dark scene, so obviously the iPhone is more realistic. So I prefer that camera. It's like, no, okay. You can take something, you can take a photo of something and make night look like day, and then it takes you literally 3 seconds to lower the exposure in whatever editing app you have, and then you make that photo look like night, but you still have the level of sharpness and detail that Nitesite gives you. So that's the background. In any case, it was revolutionary. And now the Huawei P30 Pro, with its default camera, which takes a quarter of a second for exposure, kicks Nitesite's ass. Again, you can go to the Verge.com website on the internet, and you can see the sample photos. You can also see them on my Twitter account. Without Nitesite, it looks black. Okay, the scene looks black, and that's basically the default for any smartphone. I have the this is the LG G8 over here. I shot some photos with its low light mode. The same scene just looks black because there's not enough light for the smartphone camera to pick it up. With Nitesite, you get the outline of things, but still things are still pretty blotchy because it's that dark and challenging. And then I take the same photo with the P30 Pro, and it's like I took it in the afternoon.
Yeah, it's impressive. I've played around with it a bit, but not enough, not as much as you have, and you've covered it really, really well on The Verge. One of the interesting things that Richard Yu told us in Paris was that the way they've achieved this is changing the fundamental technology of the digital sensor. Rather than using an RGB filter on top of the digital sensor, they're using an RYYB one. That's a red, yellow, yellow, blue filter. And the number that Huawei are shouting out about is that this allows in 40% extra light.
40. That's
40.
crazy.
It is, especially in a condition like low light, that makes all the difference.
Yeah.
You could say that's worth a lot more than the 40%. So do you think that that's what is part of the magic, as well as computational photography, similar to Google's Nitesite?
I do. At the same time, I am really at a loss for how Huawei is achieving this. I can get into the nitty-gritty details of explaining Nitesite to you. Nitesite makes sense to me, right? Nitesite still requires you to say there's an element of really clever AI. There's an element of really clever application of AI, which, again, some commenters whose names I will not surface because you're not supposed to punch down when you're working for a big publication and random people on the internet. So I don't quote them, but I quote the arguments because they're stupid. I'm sorry, but they are, okay? They're like, well, it's just software. The iPhone has better camera hardware. First of all, I'm not convinced it does because Huawei sensor is substantially larger than the iPhone's main camera sensor. But secondly, just software is a nonsense in 2019. Okay, when you have AI-driven capabilities, that is not something that people can just reverse engineer and slap it into their device. Okay, that stuff takes years. Google invested into its AI camera software for at least 5 years, and it was surfaced in small ways in phones like the Nexus 6P and so on. And it was an evolution before it got to the stage where it's super impressive today. Huawei has done similar things, but Huawei being Huawei, it works on a tighter timeline. And as far as I know, this RYYB sensor was developed over the course of 2 years, which, you know, Huawei, that's a lifetime for these guys, right? Because they get something and they're like, okay, we're turning this into a product in 3 months. It's happening.
Yes, and I'd say that's in part driven by not only the company itself, but the consumer business group leader, Richard Yu, who is always super enthusiastic and a products. I would say he's the most product-driven person I've ever met.
I really wish he wouldn't do the keynote, though.
I agree. His communication, though it has improved over the last few years, is still not perfect, but his enthusiasm does come across.
Yeah, but no, I'm sorry, but the important thing is how you express yourself. Like, part of why I'm doing these podcasts now, first of all, I tweeted saying I'm reviewing podcasting gear, invite me to your podcast. So thank you for having me. And I'm really sorry for like speaking so much and not letting Lukasz have a chance to speak up. please interrupt me. But part of the personal motivation for me is I realize now that I have better microphones that I need to improve my way of expressing myself verbally, right? Because I improve my way of writing, express myself in writing on a daily basis because I write. But I don't practice my speech, especially for like quote unquote a radio show or a version of a radio show like we're doing now. And I want to develop that as a skill. And the presenter of a new product should have that as almost an innate thing. Like you wake up and you have your radio voice on. You know, there are people like that. He's not even close to it. His grasp of English is not great, and his discipline with following a script is terrible. Richard, I'm talking about. And the two times where he's been really, really good communicating in English were when he just went completely off script.
So, and one of those was at CES last year.
Last year at CES. So last year at CES, he stumbled through the scripted part, and that's a frustration for me. I'm watching a man struggle through the scripted part of something because he needs to say more sophisticated things. Well, not sophisticated, but like technical terms, and he's struggling with his pronunciation. And honestly, it's like technical speech that he needs to do on the scripted part. But at the end, it was obvious that he was too pissed off, basically, with AT&T, who just pulled the rug out from under him the day before he was doing a keynote. And he was like, okay, so just on a personal note, I've been working in this industry for 20-something years. This is my passion. Like you said, products are his passion. I take pride in what I'm doing. Your trust is important to me. This is my product speaks to my entire career, etc., etc. And all of a sudden, his English became like 300% better because we were just speaking directly from the heart and off the cuff. It was a terrific speech. It lasted for like 5 minutes, and just saying, you know, we want to earn your trust as consumers. We want to do the best products. We're really invested in this thing. So believe us. And I honestly believed him when he said those things. And the second time, again at CES, but I think it was the previous year, I attended a roundtable with him, with a few other journalists. And when you speak to him, ask him questions, and he answers directly and on the moment without a script, again, he's great. But just like the thing that I'm saying is Huawei is now doing products which are leading the way. Like technologically, they're leading the way. The Huawei Mate X is the best foldable we've seen to date, and it's not even close. And all it takes is for a native English speaker or somebody with equivalent skills, because I'm not a native English speaker, but I have equivalent skills, let's say, to just get on the stage and do the presentation, and they'll do a better job. Like sometimes, as passionate as you might be about a thing, you don't need to do every job yourself. That's the advice that I have for them.
So to interrupt you here, and get
when I stopped interrupting me, okay, you're way too polite.
I am, yeah. So do you even use proper cameras now? I'm asking because the phones we have now are, I think, way beyond what we need in terms of photography. The video, I don't think is there, but photography, like I have the GH5. It's almost professional camera, especially video camera, but it doesn't take as good photos on auto as any of the latest Huawei phones. Do you see a future in consumer cameras, and do you use them still?
Oh, there's certainly a future for consumer cameras, but the question is good because I don't. I had a Sony NEX mirrorless camera until recently, and I sold that off, and I took a risk that I could do my professional photos with the Pixel 2 XL last year. And I went to the Geneva Motor Show with that phone, just with that phone and my laptop, and I felt like, holy shit, my backpack is empty. I'm forgetting something. Like I'm here covering a trade show, and I could literally leave my backpack in my hotel room, just go to the trade show, the PAL Expo exhibition, shoot this card, that card, and the other card, and then just go back to my apartment and process. And it just with the phone in my pocket. It was ridiculous, but it worked. And now, yes, I use the Pixel 3 XL to do my professional photos, which, even as I say, feels irresponsible as hell. But it does the job.
Yeah, I would agree, and especially the ability to share and to process on your phone. The current cameras are years and years behind. The smart features, I don't know how, I don't know why, but none of the Canon, Panasonic, Sony, none of those companies invest anything, Nikon, invest anything in making those phones smart. And the apps, if you ever use the Panasonic app, it's just horrible. So until camera manufacturers start thinking about end consumers who want to just take a quick photo and share it on Instagram, I don't think there's going to be any use for those cameras.
It is actually a mystery to me. As much as I do know about the camera industry, I will say one of the things is Nikon is a very well-known brand and a lot of professionals use it, but it's actually a very small company, right? So they use Sony sensors. They're not in control of their sensors like Canon might be. And they spend most of their budget and development time on new camera bodies and on new lenses and so on. So I can sympathize with them. They have a limited budget. They can't, invest millions and millions into software development, which is costly and takes time. We just had this discussion about, like, guys, I made it work, and then holy shit, now we need to make it work on like 5 different scenarios because of 5 different browsers, right? I'm sure it's the same way with software development, making that robust. So I sympathize with the camera companies to an extent, but at the same time, if you look at it from a more zoomed out point of view, you're absolutely right. Olympus, Panasonic, Sony, Canon, Nikon, not one of them has a particularly good app, mobile app connecting to their cameras, and not one of them has a particularly good user interface. And I see the same thing with car companies and their infotainment systems. Okay, Tesla came in, put one touchscreen in there, and did a whole bunch of more modern stuff. I don't think that all of it works necessarily, but the way that you just reduce it all to one touchscreen and knowing that that's your whole interface is great. Car companies, they used to have some really good ideas in terms of physical buttons and toggles and whatever else. But now that they're trying to transition into mixing that with touchscreens, they're kind of lost. Right. So the software development that we see, especially on mobile devices, like even desktop operating systems like macOS and Windows, they've kind of started stagnating. But the operating systems that we have for smartphones, Android and iOS, nothing else is moving and improving as fast as them.
I agree. I would say the only other operating systems that I would refer to as advancing as quickly are probably those of the voice assistant platforms. But the irony of it is that they don't actually run on the devices themselves. Your Amazon A's, your Google Homes, even your Siri, they're just dumb devices. The actual operating system is elsewhere. So it is a very interesting space. And you're right about automotive. That is an area where, if you work in the tech industry, a lot of recruitment is going on at the moment, not only in Germany, but around the world, because ultimately software is transferable. The only place where you actually need to have a vehicle is for testing and compliance with regulation. So it's a very interesting space. It's starting to pick up some speed. And Lukasz, you're particularly looking forward to it when you get your Tesla Model 3 in 2025. Is that the current estimate?
Around that time, yes.
Yeah.
I ordered mine in November 2016. The Tesla.com's website says 2019. It used to say early 2019. The early disappeared early in the year, so now it's just 2019. But there were 1 or 2 sightings of a right-hand wheel Model 3s in California last week, I believe. So the car is actually exists, at least one of them.
That's good. Now I wonder where we're going to see that being sold first. Will it be Hong Kong? Will it be Singapore? Will it be Australia, New Zealand, Kenya, or the UK?
I'm informed that it's UK first, and then Australia, and then other regions. That's what I read, I think, on Elon Musk's Twitter. But yeah,
which is famously reliable.
Exactly. That was my next sentence. Yeah, always trust everything that Elon Musk tweets.
Speaking of Elon Musk tweets, I don't know if you saw this, Vlad. This week, a very famous singer called Sheryl Crow tweeted about being stuck in a parking lot because the software in her Tesla was unusable for her. And I found it very amusing how everyone started quote retweeting her tweet with titles to her song.
Okay.
So she was saying, "What am I going to do?" And obviously, the quote retweet was "Run, Baby, Run," which is one of her famous tracks. Or I think it was our former colleague Sam Pulane, who said it was every day is a winding road, or something along those lines. Very, very amusing. But yes, Elon Musk's
it sounds amusing. As you can
Twitter
see,
account and their actual roadmap for releasing the products in the UK, I would say they're not too correlated elements of the conversation.
Well, I'm curious what you guys think about this. Do we need cars? Because it's a kind of a grandiose take, but one of the topics that I follow on Twitter is actually urban planning. And a lot of the people involved in that are like, we need to have a conversation about cars and why we use them and how life can be different and better without them. I know there are a number of cities. There was one in Spain recently that just eliminated a road and just made it walkways for people. And people have done research, again, in Spain about older people walking around. And the point was that, why do you see more older people walking around in this place than the other place? And the answer is, well, because it's a more walkable place. It's a more walkable city. Therefore, older people feel more comfortable, right? I don't see people in their 60s and 70s taking a walk down Manhattan, the avenues in Manhattan, or even central London. Even though central London has nice areas around the riverside, it's maybe not the best example, but still, I like the area that I live, which is in the northern suburbs of London. The number of people that have 6-meter long 4x4s, is like, what are you gonna do? Do you anticipate some sort of invasion and you need to go to war with people? Like these massive 4x4s and SUVs, and it's just, as far as I'm concerned, if you need a car, and I don't think you necessarily do, everybody should have one of those Smart 4.2s, because that's 90% of city travel is you're shopping, and maybe a second person. That's it.
I completely agree. Lukasz?
Yeah, fully agree as well. I think I heard yesterday or the day before, and the stat might be wrong, but it said that our cars are used like 5% of the time. And other 95% they're in a garage or on your street. So it's a complete waste of a property or of space, of whatever. My favorite place in the world is Singapore. For my favorite city in the world, other than Edinburgh and Krakow, my hometown, because you don't need a car there.
Wait, it's your third favorite place now. Come on, you got to pick. You can't tell me it's your first favorite place, and then other than these other two.
Yeah, but from the city planning point of view, weather and the food.
Yes, they plan the weather really well. Next.
I think yeah, you can walk everywhere in Hong Kong as well. You have walkways everywhere. It depends how the city is planned, as you're saying, and if the focus is on the people, then it will be friendly for the people. If the city, like Los Angeles, it's planned for the cars, and and as well, if you're in the car, you're stuck in a traffic jam.
So I'll just very briefly recall, because I went to Los Angeles for the first time this January. I attended NAMM, which is an audio show, and for the first time I traveled in Los Angeles, and it blew my mind. First of all, it was in a Model 3. A friend of a friend had a Tesla Model 3. So I think your choice of car is very good. I wish you, good fortune with getting that damn thing delivered, right? But I love that car. I really like it. But the other thing is, we were driving. It's some hour that should not have been peak hour. It was like 8, 9 p.m. late at night on
Yep.
a weekday, and we're on an 8-lane highway.
Yep.
And there was traffic. Like there was the whole, that star-studded carpet in front of you of just tail lights. I'm like, what the hell is going on? It's 9 p.m. on a weekday, and you have like hundreds and hundreds of cars, and this is sort of central LA.
Yep.
That makes zero sense to me.
Yeah, that's why I'm waiting for inventions like what Elon Musk is working on with Boring Company and with
No.
not necessarily that, but something that makes travel more scalable in cities. Because as you're saying, cars don't scale up. It's just gonna go crazy with the number of cars for the number of people we need to travel. So there needs to be a different solution.
I mean, I'll premise this with the fact that I'm not looking at it from a philosophical future planning of humanity point of view. My partner Candice and I live in an apartment that we bought that includes a car park space that we don't use. And the reason for that is that we looked at it purely from a financial standpoint. For having a car, especially if you own it, you're paying for something that's constantly depreciating just because of the way the automobile market is. And it makes little or no sense for us to do it. As Vlad said, most people just need a 2-seater car, maybe a 4-seater one if they have some shopping to pick up. So our solution is that we rent a car when we need it. We're not even members of a car club. And that solves our problem. The other thing is public transport in Edinburgh, we're lucky, is very, very good. We happen to live relatively near to one of the main thoroughfares to Glasgow and to the airport. We live on the tram line. I'm saying that as a singular. It is one tram that we have in Edinburgh, despite spending as much money as India spent on getting a space program. So we use public transport, and the few times we do need a car, we will rent one. And that's purely from a financial standpoint. But if I decide to put my philosopher's hat on and look at it,
I don't take it off, honestly.
Well, you see, you're lucky. That's one of the things that I believe drives some of your writing. You are constantly thinking about the bigger picture, about the impact on society, about the ethics of actions and products, which is always good to read about. But the few times I do it, and once every now and again, such as now I'm putting my philosopher's hat on, I think we still do need cars, but not as private property. I think the ideal solution, the one that Google is working towards with Waymo, that Uber was working towards in Arizona, is one of no individual car ownership, but cars utilized as much as possible, as close to 100% of the time, which are on demand. Because through the scale of society, of a whole society, not having car ownership, but the car as a service, I believe we can have much more efficient roads, roadways, and more livable cities at greater scale. So that's my personal take on this, which is standing on the shoulder of giants like Vlad, who keeps his philosopher's hat on and thinks about it a lot. But ultimately, in the meantime, as we reach this utopia of an ownership-free car society with 100% utilization of cars, Lukasz, are you planning on becoming an Uber driver with your Tesla Model 3 in 2025?
Just to see the faces of people when I stop buying this car, I think I will register potentially. Yeah.
That sounds like a good way to make sure you get more than 5% utilization of the vehicle.
Yeah, but I've been using Uber a lot. And just this morning, I woke up too late because I was redesigning my recording studio here. And I just ordered an Uber, and it got me to work in 15 minutes. It would have taken me 45 minutes taking an extra stop. So I think Uber is useful because you can't easily design a transportation system which will take us anywhere we want from anywhere we want. However, it increases the utilization of each car. So I think it's a benefit for now, at least, until we develop teleportation.
Yes.
God, the optimism of this guy today.
Well, Lukasz is always an optimist.
Here's the question: what is more realistic to happen, teleportation or Elon Musk's boring things?
So it's a very interesting question, and I actually wrote a master's.
Really? Come on.
I wrote a master's thesis on this subject. I studied philosophy myself, and I was working on a subject of personal identity, and teleportation is one of the ideas. What happens when you teleport? Are you the same person? Are you not the same person? Do you die and get reborn somewhere else? So it is actually a topic I could talk about for hours.
It is, yeah, because I mean, yeah, you are being cloned.
Yep.
So yeah, it's like are you the particular molecules that exist in space at one point in time.
Yep.
And then if those get recreated elsewhere, this is the thing that really let's censor myself, messes with my brain about the idea of cloning.
Mm-hmm.
Because you clone yourself and there will be somebody else who has the same sense of identity and value as you have about yourself.
Yep.
But at the same time, they're a clone of you. But if it's a perfect clone, and this is the other thing, I mean, this is where it gets sci-fi, because you can't have a perfect clone, so we don't need to face up to that challenge. But yeah, if there is a perfect clone of you,
mm-hmm.
like how do you interact with that being? Because that's also like when you think about privacy invasion, you know about that perfect clone about as much as Google knows about you, which is everything, right?
Yep.
So that perfect clone cannot lie to you. You know all of his weaknesses. You know all of his preferences. I don't know. It just yeah. It is a fascinating topic. You're right. But the question of teleportation or Elon Musk's boring tunnels is not a good question. That's me being a troll.
We shall see. We shall see.
But that's fine. I mean, let's face it. Brexit could do with a few boring tunnels.
Oh, we've got to talk about Brexit. Come on, you got to let me rant about Brexit. Can I please?
Go ahead. Just to give you a bit of context, Vlad, in case you haven't spent enough time with Lukasz and I, Lukasz is always the optimist. He is very positive about things. Apart from Brexit, he's slightly more negative than I am on it, whereas I'm a bit more cynical, a bit darker in general. Whilst on the subject of Brexit, I'm actually quite positive about it after negativity in 2016. So, Vlad, go ahead, open the floodgates about Brexit, and we'll see what our live listeners think of it in the comments.
Oh, please.
Welcome to YouTube, ladies and gentlemen.
Now that you premise it that way. Okay, well, here's the thing. I was shrugging it off all the way through 2016, and then it happened, and then I became about 20% cheaper for my American employer. Okay, because of the currency devaluation. But over this past month, the month of March, and call this a minority opinion. Okay, so well, let's set out my position, right? Because everybody has a camp. If I have to have a camp, it's against Brexit. Every single scientific, numerical, empirical, logical, social, cultural, economic, like every aspect that I can think of says Brexit is a stupid idea. It does not address the problem that exists in the UK. It's just people lashing out. It's othering. It's xenophobia. It's bad, okay? It's a bad idea. But the positivity that I find is over this past month of March, what has happened in the UK Parliament? First of all, John Bercow is a freaking superstar. Okay, let's get that out of the way.
I love him as well.
The way that who is this?
John Bercow, the Speaker of the House of
yes.
His way of speaking is practice, is trained. This is why I'm saying speaking is a skill, and it is gorgeous. That man can just read the A to Z or the phone book, and it will be engaging and beautiful. Like Joanna Cherry, right? The way that he rolls the R's is beautiful. So he's been great. And what has happened in the House of Commons is that party loyalty is afraid. And a whole bunch of people have resigned from their political party. A whole bunch of people have voted in favor of principle over party. And faced with kind of a desperate situation, politicians have started to do consensus building. And they've ignored the hierarchy of just saying, well, this is the government says this, and then you follow suit, blah, 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 blah. Parliament doesn't matter. Parliament, over the course of the month of March, has mattered. And politicians have found common ground because they finally realized that these are serious matters that they're dealing with. They're not freaking around. Substitute the word that I mean, with things like, I don't know, more trivial matters, okay? Like, to me, the ban on fox hunting, I know that brought out a lot of passions for people in the UK, but I am a very comfortable carnivore and I don't really care about fox welfare. So to me, it was a frivolous matter, okay? That's what they used to deal with a decade or two ago, the House of Parliament. Now they're dealing with the well-being of an entire generation of British people. Like, it's literally that serious, okay? And they're actually doing things which are constructive, which are consensus building, and which they should have been doing for a long time. So I feel like that's been good for the House of Parliament, for the House of Commons. Coming back to the idea of Brexit, there are two perspectives that I take on it. First is that it's extremely damaging. And again, it doesn't address the issue. The issue in the UK is inequality, wealth and income inequality. That's the same issues in the United States. There's a thing called the Gini coefficient, which measures inequality among people. The UK has the highest number for inequality in Europe, all across Europe. Every other country is more equal. Every other country seems to be a little less divided than the UK is right now. The Conservative government that came in 2009 immediately implemented an austerity policy, which made things worse in terms of inequality. And then everybody was hyper pissed off. And then David Cameron, who was never qualified to be prime minister, decided to patch over some political differences within his own party by just like, oh, I'll give people this referendum and they won't be stupid enough to vote. I don't think people were stupid enough to vote for it. I think they were angry enough to vote for it, right? And the thing is, you did that. I get it. And I feel like the House of Commons has become better because it just faced a serious crisis. But now we should all be serious about it and just say, your anger has been registered, but we need to stop doing this stupid thing. Like, we need to stop. The expression is, it's an English expression, for crying out loud, cutting off our nose to spite our face.
Okay, that's a very thought through philosophical view on the matter. No, that's great to hear, and it's good to see that you see a positive outcome of what is now a continuous process.
I mean, I will also say I do feel like I might have developed also a bit of Stockholm syndrome, because, like I said, I was shrugging off in 2016. Now I'm actively interested in it. So on a daily basis, I'm checking in on it. So I don't even feel all that bad about it dragging on. I'm like, well, this is my TV show right now. I don't follow anything else. Game of Thrones isn't on TV, so this is my entertainment.
Okay, so Vlad, you mentioned you tune into it daily. What are your news sources as a journalist? What do you consider your news sources to form your opinions on the matter? Do you watch the BBC? Do you watch any of the private UK channels? Or do you look at a foreign perspective?
Okay, the BBC is trash. The BBC has been total trash about Brexit. Sky News has been worse trash, but Sky News, at least you know that they have their biases and you can be comfortable with it. Here's the thing. I don't understand why the BBC has had to present Nigel Farage's point of view on these matters constantly, or Jacob Rees-Moggs. These people are fringe figures. They're literal fringe figures. And why am I not seeing the leader of the Green Party in the UK getting as much airtime? This is the thing that bothers me. The UK has third and fourth parties, right? They're small, but they exist, and they have leaders, and it has a Green Party. And it's like, the more provocative, crazy, and stupid thing that somebody has to say, the more inclusive, quote unquote, people like the BBC feel they're being by giving them a platform to speak. And that's the thing that I find stupid. Like, there are some conversations that we don't need to have anymore. Okay, immigration is good, just full stop. Okay, so if somebody is coming out and saying no, immigration is screwing our country, they're completely wrong. The UK without immigration does not exist. This podcast is evidence of the fact that the UK thrives on the strength of immigration. Okay, because all three of us are fully employed. All three of us are migrants into the UK. All three of us are paying taxes. I trust you guys are paying taxes, right? So, like, as far as my presence in the UK goes, in terms of just net economic impact, first of all, I have sold a bunch of these freaking phones, right?
And the Chinese economy thanks you.
Yeah, incidentally, I have sold a bunch of these freaking phones, and every other smartphone that has been good, I have promoted, right? Because I think that's my job. And I have not had to, fortunately, I've not had to use the National Health Service, which I'm really glad exists. And I've paid thousands of pounds into it, again, which I'm glad to do. So don't tell me immigration is the problem with your country. It is not. And if you're going to put people like that on TV, I don't understand why. Because they're resurfacing conversations that should have ended decades ago. The evidence is there. The economics data is there. Now, if you put the Green Party on TV and they start telling you stuff like, hey, maybe we don't all need to have cars. Maybe public transport should be our priority. Maybe the environment matters. Maybe clean air and clean water are more important than corporate profits. Maybe, right? Those are actually conversations we haven't had enough of. So I don't think the BBC has done a good job of it. Sky News is Brexiteer central, and it's hilarious when a vote goes against them. They're so freaking frustrated they just become whiny bitches, right? So TV channels are not very good. I go to Twitter a lot, and I know that people, are gonna say it's a trash heap, but you also have to be intelligent about the way you use these sources. Sky News have the constant live stream on YouTube, and I tune into that, right? Because they can't misrepresent the facts. Like, the one thing they don't do is misrepresent the facts, and they have a live feed of the House of Commons of votes, and I can watch that, and I can just tune out their opinions. And I think that's another thing. It's a privilege for me to be a journalist and to be dealing with new information all the time, and to always be alert to is this good information? How is it sourced? Where is it coming from? Can I use it to write an article, etc., etc.? I'm like in that mode of thinking all the time. I think everybody else should have similar sort of training, which is literally media consumption and information consumption. We think we understand the language, therefore we understand the message, but maybe we don't. I don't think we do, right? Before I got into my job when I was a kid, I would just know Afghanistan, scary place. Okay, Afghanistan, place where war happens. And all of the context of, well, Syria has a history that stretches back to the beginning of human civilization. Like, news programs don't give that to you. They strip that out. And the context of knowing why people fight in faraway places, again, it's a news bulletin, it's not a documentary, so it kind of has to be diluted down. And then you lose a lot of that context. So I feel like people need to learn how to go about finding their own context and how to restrain themselves from jumping to conclusions. So if you're asking me who does good Brexit coverage, I would say nobody. Good Brexit understanding is a job that you have to do yourself.
I agree with that. One of the things I'd say is I'm maybe just a bit more pragmatic about this. I follow the money. Ultimately, we know that human history is driven by the economics. We can dress up religion, we can dress up philosophy, we can dress up everything as something else, but ultimately it comes down to self-interest and economics. So one of my preferred sources of news on this type of matter is the financial publications. What is the Financial Times saying about it? What is Bloomberg saying about it? Mm-hmm. What are the economic ones doing? And again, there's varied opinion. A lot of them get represented in a quite balanced manner, because I would say, especially in the financial press industry, there's a lot more understanding of the impact of how things are reported. So I do enjoy getting up early in the morning, feeding the cats, and then watching Bloomberg. I think the UK countdown team, Anna Edwards and others, really have great coverage of what's happening behind the economics of Brexit and what the outcomes could be. So it's changing also, I think, the average person, not only in the UK, but across the world's way of consuming media. Just the way you said you wanted to have, you would like to have everyone have this taught to them, is you don't just go to one source, you don't believe one thing. There's lots of different points of view, there's lots of different contexts and outcomes that may not have been looked at. I think this is a good thing. But then when I go to visit my parents in Italy, I see there's a very different context with the way they're seeing it. People in Italy seem to be hurting because currently the Italian economy is out of sync with other countries in Europe, most specifically Germany and France. Therefore, the cost of living is going up. People are not as happy as they used to be. And there is starting to be a significant movement of people who want to push back on the European Union. They want to push back on Europe. And I think the UK is the first example. As you said, there are people who are hurting and who wanted to have their voice heard. That has happened in the UK. I get the feeling that this will happen elsewhere as well. The European Union, to a certain extent, has ignored that up to now, but can't afford to do it again. So we'll see what happens with this.
And I know you and we disagree on this, and you're being very gentle about a disagreement. But I think okay, so the current talking point from Brexiteers is believe in Britain. Okay, you're all cowards. You want to stay under their rule. Blah blah blah. Believe in Britain. Britain can rise again. And I just think, obviously, I think that's bullshit. And the reason I do is, if you believe in the UK, you stay in the EU, and you enhance your negotiating position. You put forward your point of view more forcefully. Like if you're Italy, you go to those meetings and you just have a more robust point of view and expression, right? It is not the case that the EU is dictated by France and Germany. Granted, they're the leaders, but that's fair. But the UK used to be too. And the UK was the one that was prissy and just kept making demands. No, we want this to be different as well. We want that to be different as well. Like, what people don't appreciate is that the UK wasn't a regular EU member before the referendum. It had a bunch of exemptions. It had a bunch of special treatment provisions. And this is why you don't have a Brexit agreement today, because it's literally, we didn't used to have EU membership. Well, it's still the case, but it's not regular EU membership. It's not the thing that was served up to Bulgaria, right? The thing that Bulgaria got, let's say, was steak. It was fine, but it was just regular steak. What the UK had was some fucking grade A Wagyu beef. I'm sorry for my language, but it's legit, right? It's the sort of the beef that has been massaged from calf stage to full cow stage, and they've given emotional therapy to the cow, so it's extra tender, extra moist. It's as good as you can get as far as EU agreements go. And this is the trouble with the UK. It constantly kept pulling away from the Europe, right? It constantly kept pulling away from the EU instead of jumping in and saying, okay, we're part of this and we're going to lead the way. That used to be the case, right? Back in the 70s and 80s, the UK used to lead the way. So that if you believe in Britain, you participate in the EU and you steer it in what you believe is the right direction. I think the same should be the case for Italy, because for the protest action to be to leave is just a literal act of self-destruction, because you have China and you have the United States, and they have extremely dominant economic positions. The United States can be an absolute autopilot. It does not need a president, because Google and Facebook dominate global advertising on the web, and the web is where all the money is going. Okay, Apple, Qualcomm, Intel, these are the companies that are also going to lead the way into 5G. So there's, I mean, you laugh, but 5G will eventually be very important.
It definitely will. And not only 5G as the technology for delivering it, but also the infrastructure requirements to enable 5G.
Yeah,
which is the fun part.
Oh, really? That's the fun part.
Well, I say that as someone who I say that as someone who had a BT engineer run fiber into my living room. It's actually sitting around the corner here, specifically because I want my share of bandwidth.
No, fair. But here's the point. As a tech journalist, the thing that I've observed over the past few years is if you take Europe as the middle, all the really exciting and compelling new devices and technologies are kind of drifting out to the sides. Okay, so let me look at, so the US would be here, China would be here.
Very good.
Right.
Yes, that's perfect.
Yes.
Perfect for our viewers on the Tech
That's
Travel.
what I'm trying to get. Right. So any new smartphone, there will be a pre-briefing for it ahead of the announcement in New York City. Okay, so we would go to Mobile World Congress in Barcelona, you and I, but most of those things will be shown to Americans in advance, and then hopefully those people keep their embargoes in check. Some people don't. But basically, new technology goes to New York. Why? Because the United States has 300 and whatever million people, and most of them are willing and able to be consumer electronics consumers. Okay, China has 1 billion and something, and a lot of them are becoming the same as in the US, willing and able consumers. And this is why a company like Vivo and Oppo can be one of the top 5 smartphone manufacturers without having much of a presence outside of China and its periphery. Okay, so you have one market which is 300 and whatever million, one market which is 1 and whatever billion, and then you have Europe which is 500 million. And the moment you decide to step out of Europe, whether you're the UK with 60 something, 70 million population, or I'm not sure of the Italian population, please.
Around about 68 million.
Right.
But again, that's highly unreliable to a certain extent.
Right. And
of the
but
dynamics.
then you become a minnow. Then you're a fraction of everybody else in all of your trade negotiations, because trade is the thing that keeps countries, trade and immigration are the things that keeps countries thriving, on the back foot.
I would say there's a yes and a no to that. So when we talk specifically about tech, that is the case. Europe is not a driver of innovation, and in a way is purely a consumer of these things.
It's growing more and more to be, yeah.
The EU as a whole is struggling to be innovative on that, whether that's because of excessive regulation or whether it's just a cultural aspect of that. It's a sad reality. The EU doesn't have anything exciting in the consumer electronics and R&D space, apart from those American and Chinese companies you just mentioned, companies like Qualcomm, companies like Motorola, Nokia, Ericsson. And also Huawei have enormous R&D presence in the UK and the EU. But it's all their innovation that's being driven. And I think that the UK has a chance of being very successful, being on the fringe of the EU, not being entirely part of it, yet being open to make its own deals out with the European Union. Now, one of the things let's put it this way, the people who were against Brexit shouted out about, as soon as the news was launched, about Japanese car makers deciding to slowly remove their plants from the UK. I didn't realize that the real reason they were doing this was the fact that the EU as a whole had just done a deal to remove tariffs for importing cars from Japan. Therefore, the needs the Japanese companies had for producing their cars in the UK went away. I believe that being outside the EU and still having a freedom of making their separate deals may actually be the unique selling point of the UK in the long term. In the short term, yes, there will definitely be a certain level of disruption and dependence on existing EU arrangements from an economic standpoint. But I think that in the long term, not being tied by this less agile, large behemoth that is the European Union is actually going to be an advantage.
Okay,
but
no.
we can disagree on that.
No, okay. Well, our final point of disagreement, and then we can move on. But and I'm looking at my video feed, and since I don't have a light on,
well, you see, you're obviously not using a Huawei P30 Pro as your webcam in this case.
This is fair. See, you say the UK being more agile, and that's where the fantasy comes in. And the UK is not agile. The UK is complacent. Most of UK industry, as I say, up until this past month, most of UK politics is complacent. Like David Davies, who used to be the chief UK negotiator, he went into a negotiating meeting with the EU, and they had stacks and files, and people who had spent the previous week just studying everything and just getting really up to speed. And he's like, "Yeah, I'm gonna wing it. No notes. It's fine. Good old Britain. Everybody loves us, right?" No. If you had a country which was like the Netherlands, let's say, which is one of the top countries in terms of educational attainment, people are basically native level English speakers. Most people also speak French, and education is highly valued, etc., etc., etc. And you have like a really highly qualified population. I can accept the idea of agility. The UK is a country that has coasted on its reputation. Well, I say a country. It's not a country, right? It's a combination of countries. But hey, we can just hate on England. England has coasted on its reputation for a very long time, and has been selling off intangible assets such as, selling its football teams across the world, going on world tours. Tourism is a big source of income. And for a long, long time, the UK was benefiting from the fact that London is an English-speaking landing spot for Americans, and it's the closest to the US. So investment banks and financial firms from the US that wanted to invest in Europe were like, okay, we have the language and we have the nearest time zone, so London makes the most sense. And this is how you had a lot of funding flooding into the UK. The UK is a leading manufacturer of aeronautics parts, weapons, yes, and maybe some car stuff, and that's pretty much it, right? So who are you going to be striking all of these trade deals with? Who are you going to be all that agile with? You don't have the expertise, right? You've seen the PISA rankings of countries. This is the other thing. I tweeted about this in like 2016. The UK is 20-something in terms of educational attainment in school. The United States is 30-something. And I was saying, if you're not in the top 20 countries in the world in terms of educational attainment, maybe you shouldn't have referendums.
I would argue that educational attainment standards.
I think Lukasz is agreeing with me silently.
Yeah, Lukasz definitely does agree with you on that. I would argue that educational attainment standards are not something that I would consider a reliable overall way of judging.
Well, consider me, because I grew up in the UK. I went to UK school. It's trash. Okay. In the second year of my school in Bulgaria, I was doing more advanced mathematics than I did in year 8 in London.
Right. Okay.
It is not of a high enough standard. People leave school without the necessary skills, literacy, numeracy, like just the basics. Right. If you don't go to like a private tutor, if you don't go out of your way to study up on those things, if you don't go to a paid school, you lack the skills. And that's a chronic problem that the UK has. And again, that's the problem that the UK has. It's not an EU problem. It's not like EU regulation said, hey, don't punish your kids by making them actually learn shit. Okay, don't make them study too hard.
So you think it's a cultural issue?
Well, cultural. I don't know that I would call it cultural. It's an internal issue. It's a national issue. And this is one thing. Again, I've spent 20 years in London, so I have a reasonable amount of experience here. And when I was in school, I would read The Sun for particular reasons.
Page 3 by any chance?
I think the implication was sufficient, Matteo. You didn't need to specify. But
just for our listeners,
the sports pages, okay?
Yes.
For the sports pages,
Very good. And the horoscope. Let's not forget the horoscope. For those of you who are watching or listening to this episode of the Tech Travel Geeks podcast, The Sun is a tabloid. It's a popular newspaper in the UK, and it has lots of eye-catching content. It's known best for its pictures rather than the content itself, which may be one of the reasons Vlad grew into being a very talented photographer and very
Don't give us some credit for anything.
Very good at capturing content with cameras and smartphones.
The point is, I used to read UK tabloids, and when I did, anytime there was something bad to discuss on a national level, politicians just used the EU as a dumping boy. Well, it's the EU fault. Okay, EU regulation stands in the way of us fixing policing. EU regulation stands in the way of us providing such and such bananas. EU regulation, EU regulation. It's all those bloody bureaucrats in the EU. Oh, blah, blah, blah. And it's like, I just want you to think logically about this. All the bureaucrats in Brussels, because I've worked with the EU, so again, I speak from experience. All the bureaucrats in Brussels are people who have multiple degrees worth of qualifications, because for you to get a job in Brussels, it's a prestigious thing. You need to pass through a whole bunch of interviews and a rigorous recruitment process. You need to have a bunch of qualifications, and they are all super proud of the fact that they have that job, and they do it conscientiously, right? I've met Bulgarian EU officials, Spanish, Italian, etc., and they feel both their nationality and European, and they feel like they're representing their country. Okay, so if I get a job in Brussels, I'll be like, I need to do my best, because I'm not just here representing myself, I'm representing my part of Europe. And I don't want everybody to think that Bulgarians are corrupt and not to be trusted. So I want to do the best job that I can. So what I'm saying is, the people that I met in Brussels, the people who work in the EU, sure, there's a lot of bureaucracy, but they're extremely qualified, right? Nobody there has a job because their dad knew somebody. Okay. Jacob Rees-Mogg is all that I'm going to put forward as the counter. If you vote for Brexit, you're saying, I don't want anonymous, highly qualified bureaucrats in Brussels. I want fucking Jacob Rees-Mogg, pardon my language, to be the one making decisions for me. That's who. If you take power from Brussels, that's who you're handing it to. You're handing it to people like him.
True. Then again, we need to see how this all plays out. It's a constant.
No, that's not a thing. We need to see how it plays out. There is an elite of Oxford-educated. It's a pipeline of Oxford-educated ponces like Boris Johnson, like David Cameron, like George Osborne, like Theresa May, who are responsible for this mess that the UK is in right now. And it's essentially being elected to the House of Parliament is still either a hereditary title, like in the House of Lords, or close to hereditary title, because only rich posh boys are standing for election. So there's a whole bunch of stuff that the UK needs to correct internally, which includes its electoral system. But this is going so far away from travel. I'm sorry.
Yep. Vlad, we'll have to have you back on, or we could just start a philosophy and politics podcast at some point to discuss the merits of proportional representation. Yes,
it's gotten dark, literally, and in terms of topic.
We'll have you back on to discuss the merits of proportional representation. Absolutely. And potentially its pitfalls at another date. But speaking about a arguably more conflictual subject, what happened to AirPower?
AirPower. How is that more conflictual? Good. Okay, now we're back to tech. AirPower was Apple's hubris, I would say. AirPower was supposed to be the wireless charger that would charge your iPhone, your AirPods, and your Apple Watch at the same time on the same surface. And as an idea, it's a brilliant idea. But each one of those devices required different wireless charging coils, and sticking a bunch of them in there and overlapping them and not having the magnetism conflicting evidently was too much of a technical challenge. And Apple promised that it would have the AirPower charger, I believe, a couple of years ago now even. I think they promised it around the time they launched the AirPods. And a week or two ago, they canceled it and they said it's not up to our standards, which basically means they can't make it work. And I think that's a shame. But it is what it is. I mean, in fact, it might be the only product that Apple has announced and then canceled before releasing. I can't think of another one.
How about their social network, Ping?
No, that happened.
That happened. They actually
that existed for 2 minutes.
no,
It
no one
existed for 2
noticed.
minutes. People saw it was terrible, and then they were like, "Nope."
No, okay. So it is another product Apple has cancelled, but it actually made it to market.
Yeah.
No, I asked about the AirPower specifically because, especially if you live in the UK and you open Twitter on Sunday evening or Saturday evening, all that was on Twitter was the death of AirPower and Brexit. It was a very interesting time, and I took the opportunity to switch off for a while. I tend to do this sometimes out of choice, sometimes not, but mostly not out of choice when I'm traveling. And I'm going to try and take the Tech Travel Geeks podcast slightly closer to its normal rollout and ask Vlad about his travel experience, and more importantly, what type of travel he does and what gadgets he takes with himself when traveling. Vlad, would you like to take some time to turn on a light, or are
I'm
you
doing that right
going
now.
to do the Prince of Darkness thing?
Okay. This is now the Huawei P30 Pro helping us.
Excellent.
Do
The
thing.
LED, the quad LED flash, is that it?
Yeah, it's kind of killing my eyes, but I'll just look this way. I'll look sideways. Travel is something that I do a ton of. I'm actually trying to reduce it. For the past 4 years or so, I've done like 7 to 10 work trips per year. Okay. The phone didn't,
For
the
those
phone did not
listening
want
to the
stay
audio
up.
version, this was the Huawei P30 Pro crashing and getting Vlad back into darkness. No, he's
Yeah.
propped it up again.
Okay. So where was I? Yes. 7 to 10 work trips might be fine if you don't have a constant stream of things that you need to do and a constant stream of reviews that you need to do, which I do have. So it's tended to be a case where I go to the airport and there's always something else to write. So I settle down, whip out my laptop, start doing a bit of writing, submit it for editing, get on the flight, travel, land, check up on things, address edits, get out of the airport, etc. My typical schedule has been CES in Las Vegas in January, February Mobile World Congress in Barcelona, March is the Geneva Motor Show, in June there's Computex in Taipei, September is Berlin and IFA, and October and November tends to be the times when companies like Volvo and Hasselblad might call me out to Sweden just to show off some new stuff. I'm actually really impressed with Sweden in terms of its innovation. Like you say, the EU doesn't have much innovation going, but in fact, there's a lot of smaller companies and startups in Sweden, people who are doing backpacks, people who are doing in-ear headphones, and just doing creative things. I mean, we shouldn't neglect the fact that individual people, so not true creator Minecraft, you can think whatever you want about him and his politics, but he created Minecraft and he came out of Sweden. PewDiePie, again, you can think whatever you like about him, but he's somebody who came out of Sweden.
Douchebags, our favorite.
I'm sorry, who?
Douchebags.
Yes, the company making bags with a terrible name. And the young lady who's now promoting environmentalism, Greta Thunberg, she's out of Sweden. And I think to the point about cultural matters, there is a culture in Sweden that promotes that sort of independence. I think we can draw a line between those people that I mentioned, including douchebags, that independent thinking, right? And so it's a fascinating place to me because it's where culture feeds into the products of a country. It feeds into the economic output of a country. But yeah, I mean, I it's not really worth me going through every single location that I go every year. The reason I should say that I'm trying to reduce traveling is because its effects on health are pretty terrible, right? And we kind of underestimate that. We kind of underestimate the fact that even if we sleep on a flight, we're not going to get high quality sleep. It's trash sleep, right? It's like junk food of sleep. And we need to rest. We need to sleep. If you're constantly rushing back and forth, you're not resting. I noticed that with a lot of people where they're like the week before they go on vacation, they'll rush through a bunch of things because they need to get those things done before they go on that vacation. And then it takes them the entire vacation to take off the stress of rushing. And nowadays I'm like, listen, why not just take off a week from work and then just keep off Twitter and keep off the email and just stay at home and just live a regular life, right? Because it becomes also stressful to book a holiday where you're like, okay, now I need to book flights again. Now I need to optimize the damn price. And I know you guys provide services to make that easier, right? Granted, Sky's kind of helps. But yeah, the travel is a tricky thing. Like without it, I would be so much lesser of a person because I would have so many fewer experiences. But just like smartphones, just like everything else, I think like all of us have gone a bit too far with it. And we need to do less of it, be more judicious about when we should do it, when we shouldn't. A good example is I went to Japan for the first time last year in June. And that was a place where I had high expectations because I knew all the cliches about everything working like clockwork and everybody being neat and polite and so on. And it actually outdid them. Like, it's the only place in the world where I thought I have high expectations and I went to it and it rose above them. Usually, I mean, Paris is a really good example, and London to some extent. It's super high in people's estimation who don't live there and haven't been there. And then you go to the place and you realize that 70% of it smells of piss. And you're like, it's not as nice as the postcards, right? Whereas Tokyo was the exact opposite. Before I visited Tokyo, I thought the bigger the city, the more degraded everything becomes, right? And Tokyo showed me that if people actually engaged in the sense of being part of a society, as opposed to I'm an individual and I'm taking care of myself, and everybody else can get effed, feeling like you're part of a group and then contributing to that, you can have even massive metropolises like Tokyo work really well.
Yeah. So you mentioned you went to Japan. I was following you on Twitter at the time, and I have to say I was touched by one of the bed and breakfasts or guest houses you stayed in Japan, who made the effort of actually putting out a Bulgarian flag for you.
Yeah.
That's really, it just shows you how much thought goes into hospitality in Asia in general, but I'd say particularly in Japan from a cultural standpoint, from what I've read. Japan is one of the places I wish to go to in the coming years. Sadly, in September, I was wanting to go there for the Rugby World Cup, but other plans took place instead. But yes, that's definitely one of the things. I think travel is a good thing in terms of it opens people's perceptions and understanding of culture and society elsewhere. And just as you said, sometimes it can be disappointing. Something that you had a perception of, very positive perception of before going there, then is a bit of a letdown when you actually visit. Personally, for me, that was New York. I was a bit disappointed by, in particular, how dirty the city was last time I was there.
Yeah. Honestly, I think, sorry to interrupt you there, but I think if the smell of piss could be reduced in all these places, they would actually get much closer to their hype outside. I mean, I was there in the summer in New York a few years ago around Central Park, and Central Park is where Home Alone 2 was happening. You know, all these iconic movies that you remember from your childhood, and then you walk in it and it's just, in that case, it might have been horse piss because there's a lot of horse-drawn carriages happening, moving around. But it was just no. And Barcelona has an issue with its sewage system, which you're nodding your head because you know what I'm talking about. And it's like, yeah, I mean, those are things where if people felt like they were part of a group, like my perception, and this is, I've been super categorical about a lot of things I've said today, but this is one of the things where I'm less certain. My perception is that people in Asia, figuring Taipei, where I've been into this, as well as Tokyo, they seem more aware of the fact that they can't escape the group, right? You are part of the group. You will be part of other people. You will be really close up with them. And you just kind of have to account for the fact that you're a member of a group as opposed to an individual who prioritizes him or herself at all times. And that small bit of consciousness, the fact that you're not just throwing your trash away from yourself and that's enough. Maybe you shouldn't generate trash. Maybe you should throw it away from everyone. Is the thing that makes a difference. Because the moment you become aware of everyone's interests, you serve your own. You know, like I try to generate as little trash as possible, and that helps me because if everybody does this thing that I'm doing, we just don't have trash, we don't have pollution, and we have cleaner environments around us. But okay, let's let Lukasz say something because again I've been ranting. What has been your biggest letdown, Lukasz?
Letdown? I'm not sure, but I keep on coming back to Singapore, which is actually the opposite of a letdown because it's so clean, it's so organized. When you look at the groups of people, everyone looks to, they're going somewhere, but they seem to have a purpose. And there is a sense of this community, and you will not see any trash around. You will not see any unnecessary things. They don't own cars either. The cars are super expensive there because they increased the price of getting a driver's license, I believe, and registering a car because they know it's not sustainable, and everyone getting a car in such a small city state is not sustainable. So I guess this helps them and making a country more friendly for the people, and that's, I think, what we need. Cities are for people, right? Not for cars.
Yeah. So that's interesting. So Vlad, you've taken it from a slightly more philosophical and identity of self within a community, which is noticeably different between Asia and Western societies. And so you traveled to Japan, you found this eye-opening and it exceeded your expectations.
Yeah.
What's your next dream trip? If you could choose to go and travel and see something in the world, and you had little or no limitations, what would it be?
I mean, I do have little or no limitations. I'm very rich. No, I'm joking. It's a good question. I think it would be something, because like I said, I'm trying to reduce my travel now, so I'm being hypersensitive about the return on investment when it comes to traveling. I do still want to go back to Japan and see Mount Fuji for myself. I want to see all the shrines and all the temples and the forests, because even the basics, even things like the forestry in Asia is different. You have a bunch of oak trees over here, maybe they have different leaf trees over there. And this I'm saying based on photos I've seen. I know that in Japan they value nature and the preservation of nature very highly. I want to just explore that. I want to see more of that. So maybe I really should be living in Japan already and just doing that on a weekly basis. I want to ride one of those bullet trains. Hell yeah, I want to ride one of those. I also want to go to China, but very briefly before I, get lung cancer from the pollution. I do want to see how Shenzhen operates. I've been to Hong Kong, and again, I agree. I think Lukasz was mentioning that city planning is great there. It's really apparent, the fact that there is active city planning in the way that everything is laid out. So I'm impressed with Hong Kong, and Shenzhen is apparently like just, 15 minutes away.
It's 15 minutes away. I'd say it's in a way luckier than Hong Kong in its topography, the way the hills and the land is laid out. And obviously a newer city that went through a similar planning process. And I'd say Shenzhen is probably one of the cleanest cities I've been to in China. Also, if you want to ride a bullet train, there's an excellent set of bullet trains that pass through and around Shenzhen. If you want to see the slightly less planned and more, let's put it this way, organically grown cities, Guangzhou is just up the river delta. Yeah. And then you can quickly get another bullet train heading south to Zhuhai and Macau and see this other side of things. So Zhuhai is where one of our friend companies that does smartphones called Meizu is based. And it's, again, a very different setup. Light industrial, not heavy industrial, but very planned, very green. Zhuhai is like I would say the Los Angeles of the Pearl River Delta, and a very interesting place.
Well, that doesn't sound encouraging at all.
It's different, as in there's hardly any traffic, at least when I went there midweek. It was very green, lots of palm trees, lovely bit of coastline, looking at Shenzhen and Hong Kong from the other side of the bay. And then there's this marvelous new bridge that goes all the way across from Hong Kong to Macau. So I'd say if you want to go on a high-speed train, that's a great place to do it. And it's really easy to book your train tickets. Even first class is amazing. Both power plugs and drinks and food service is very good.
I should mention, I just realized, I don't know, 30 minutes after I turned on the Huawei P30 Pro that I have a freaking light on my desk behind my laptop. Oh, God. But, okay. But I do want to answer your question because it's really enticing to me about where I would like to go. I think I would like to go to South America and see a place like Machu Picchu. And yeah, just maybe the Amazon Delta. But again, kind of like China and my reservations about air pollution, I don't want to stay in the Amazon Delta long enough to pick up some freaky, tropical disease, right? Just dabbling, right? Maybe I can like go in for a day. Hey, nice, okay, jungle, cool, bye. But yeah, I feel like South America is one of those places that we don't even hear enough about, we don't see enough about, and can be left almost entirely ignorant of.
I had the pleasure of going there a few years ago. I went to Rio in Brazil, then went to Iguazu Falls, which are just a stunning place. If you've been to Niagara Falls, it's, multiple times more impressive. It's just amazing. It's on the border of Brazil, Argentina, and I forgot another country nearby.
Just a Mexican country.
Mexican country, yes.
Yeah. And I need to clarify my joke here before people hate me. Fox News actually had a Chiron, I can never remember how you pronounce that, saying Trump to block immigration from 3 Mexican countries. Or no, to block aid to 3 Mexican countries. This was like a week ago or so. And just...
Oh dear. Vlad, is one of the reasons you want to go to South America maybe because some of the world's largest productions of avocados come from there?
Possibly. I don't know. Is it South America or is it Mexico? Is it Central America?
Well, it's throughout Central America and the north of South America. There's a lot of avocado production. Mexico is one of the leading countries that exports to the US, but throughout the whole region, yes.
Mm-hmm. This is a fair point. Very fair point you raise. I do have a friend called Loic. He's French, who lives in Brazil. And he has sent me photos of avocados over there. And just a very average size avocado for them is something the size of my head. I'm like, when you cut that thing, how many weeks does it take you to eat it, for crying out loud? They're just massive. Okay,
to explain to the Tech Travel Geeks listeners, much in the same way, there's gags on the internet about me being a goat expert and a crocodile enthusiast. Vlad is known on the internet as being a purveyor of raw food and healthy diets, and in particular,
for them.
He's
I'm an avocado advocate.
He's an avocado advocate, also known to those who know him as the Vladocado.
No, that's just you.
I'm sure I heard that on the Verge podcast many years ago, but yes, I refer to you as the Vladocado, and so bear that in mind when listening to this. Okay, so travel to Central America just enough to not get anything nasty, either in the jungle or because of pollution. And what would you travel with? What do you travel with? What are the necessities from a tech standpoint that make your travel experience better for you?
I try to keep it to socks and toothbrush and like physical necessities as much as possible. I mean, this is part of my job, is to try and get away with as little as possible in terms of tech gear. So when you see on YouTube, for example, some of those, hey, here's what's in my tech backpack videos, and then you see someone with a 40-liter backpack and they've put every single games console, every single pair of headphones, every single whatever, right? Every single dongle and accessory and everything else stuffed into the backpack. No. Okay, no. One of the fortunate things for me was I'm also cycling between backpacks a lot because I do backpack reviews as well. And I think I went to Geneva Motor Show this year, and I forgot that I had my little bundle of dongles, accessories, cables, memory cards, etc., just stuffed into a little compartment in the backpack, like right at the bottom of the backpack. And halfway through the trip, I was like, "Oh, damn! I forgot my thing at home." I was in a hurry leaving home before the trip, so I was like, I must have forgotten my bundle of accessories." And I just walked around not having it. And then at the end of the trip, I realized, oh, it's there. And then I realized, well, how often do I actually go into this bundle of dongles and accessories? And when I say dongles, it's things like USB-A to USB-C, so I can plug things into my MacBook Pro. It's a SD card reader and a bunch of SD cards in the event that I have an actual camera with me as opposed to a smartphone. I've got audio dongle as well for USB-C. And I should recommend to people, the best audio dongle that you can get is by a company called HIDIZS. It's HIDIZS. It's something like $20, and it really is one of the best. I think that and the Essential Phones USB-C dongle are the best ones. I am eventually going to write about the damn HIDIZS thing when I get some time on The Verge. But there you go. That's a tip. But aside from that, I just realized I didn't need to have a full bundle of accessories. And this is not the best representation, but it's something like this, right? You have a little pouch full of junk. So then I realized after that trip, I don't need to carry this with me. So nowadays, when I'm traveling, I have my smartphone. I have a USB-C charger, which charges my smartphone, my headphones, because I am an absolutist now. If it doesn't charge via USB-C, just forget you. It charges my laptop, MacBook Pro. I am super keen also to get one of those Anker gallium nitride chargers, which have a battery built in because the charging tech has shrunken down so much. But until I do, I have a 10,000 or is it 20,000 milliamp hour external battery, Anker. Those are really good. I do have a bunch of USB-C cables just for the sake of convenience. You know, every backpack has like 17 pockets. Oh, this is another thing. Don't be too organized when you're packing. Right, so if you're messy enough, it helps you. So stick a cable in here, stick a cable in there. One thing I did once was I collected all my micro USB cables and put them in a box. And I was like, yes, I'm organized now, right? But then I put that box in storage, and then I was like, I need a micro USB cable. Where are they? And they're nowhere because they're in one particular space. Okay, so redundancy is good. So have more than one of the things that you really use a lot. Which in my case actually means I should never go anywhere with just one smartphone. I always have to have a fallback. The MacBook Pro I tend to rely on. So
how is it going? Sorry to interrupt you. How is it going through security with bags of phones for you?
It's amusing and a little bit disappointing because I don't get stopped. And it's frustrating to me because there is a lot of dodgy shit in my backpack. Like if you just look at it via an X-ray, it doesn't look right. Okay. Sometimes, like if I'm traveling to the United States, first of all, airline food is garbage, right? I try to eat a low carb diet. They don't service that at all. It's either the pasta or the chicken with extra carby junk. So I'm like, okay, fine. I'll just boil a few eggs, put the eggs in my bag, bring an avocado, obviously a mix of eggs and avocados. So I get a nice meal. I don't need to be a burden on anybody. Everything's fine. But if you look at that in an X-ray, you know, it's a ton of eggs. It's a lot of eggs. Why isn't anybody stopping me if I'm traveling with so many eggs? another thing is I've traveled with a Hasselblad camera with 3 batteries next to it. It's a massive ass camera, that Hasselblad. Sometimes I'll travel with that and a Fujifilm on top, so that's 2 cameras. I might have 4 phones in there, still in the same backpack. There's the laptop. There's the external battery, the Anker that I mentioned, and there's all these wires going back and forth. And like, I just think about it as a flat 2D image, and I would just freak out. I'll be like, this does not look normal. I'm confident that nobody's traveling with like $60,000 worth of tech equipment in a backpack as often as I do. And I would feel more comforted if people were like, hang on a second, why do you have all of this shit? Is this contraband? Are you gonna sell this? Are you a traveling smartphone salesman? What is your point? What is your game here, sir? Right? And they don't do that. And I feel like it's because I'm a white male. And
So, yeah, that might be it. But I find it amusing, especially going through security in airports in the US. Especially in previous years when the Android version was Oreo. My carry-on bag would often have, coming to or from the US, would have a lot of tech, but also I would get the amazing flavors of Oreo cookies that you can't get here, either for our colleagues in the office or just for personal consumption.
probably because it's not really edible, because it's just
exactly. But if you think about
food.
If you think about it, the US packs of Oreo cookies are the big square ones with stacks of cookies in each one. And on the X-ray, those actually look like prepared sticks of dynamite or plastic explosive.
Wow.
Whereas my bag of phones wasn't. And it was always the bag with the Oreo cookies in it that got stopped and searched.
Really? I was going to say, I'm sure those guys are savvy about what looks like actual dynamite.
Well, I would expect it, but it's the carry-on case of the Oreo cookies that got most attention. The fact that I have a passport saying that I was born in a Middle Eastern country probably didn't help. But it was the Oreo cookies that triggered things, not the
I was
tech.
going to ask if your audience is already aware of where you were born and how that affects your travel.
I believe they are, yes. It doesn't affect me too badly. I'm used to it. Usually whoever's traveling with me is used to it, but the random searches seem to be frequent. I'm a bit of a lottery winner in that
So
space.
this is the other thing, and Tika mentioned this, that often she gets strip searched when traveling. And I haven't even come close to that. And have you had that experience?
Yes, especially after 2001. Yes, in 2000, after 2001, someone in my age group with a particular history on his passport seemed to trigger all the databases. Also, because I'm an outlier, I'm a Caucasian male, and within a certain age group, that obviously looks suspicious. But more recently, it's more about the tech or what's in my luggage. Lukasz has been through security with me a few times, and there's always questions about why do you have 6 phones with you? And I have to explain that either I'm traveling for work and I have these for work, or I'm covering a tech conference or event, and these are pre-review devices. They're all registered to me. I usually have to demonstrate that my fingerprint or my face unlocks the device before they let me through. But yeah, it's an interesting thing. Security is always arguably mostly a facade, but a sanity check, more for the passengers themselves than it is for real security reasons. Yeah, so that's an interesting one. So you haven't had that many issues going through security with bags of tech?
No. And I will say, and this goes back to my own history of being an immigrant. When I moved from Bulgaria to the UK, we needed visas because Bulgaria wasn't part of the EU. And then in 2007, all those requirements got stripped away, and we were, because Bulgaria entered the EU, and we were sort of equivalent EU citizens, and that gave us a lot of freedom. It gave us a lot of liberty. And since then, I've just been kind of an asshole while traveling, and I am like, try and stop me, please try and stop me, so we can have this conversation. Because screw you. Yes, this is my Bulgarian nationality. I don't care if you've never seen it before, because people in Denmark I'm like, Bulgaria? What is this again? I've had this happen. Yes, I'm a European citizen. Fuck you. You will let me through on my national ID. I will not get an international passport out for you. I have one. I will not get it out for you because I'm supposed to travel on this way. And, you know, the difference between being an outsider, like I was until 2007, and inside the club is massive, right? Because, and I have Russian friends who still have to get a visa to go everywhere. Well, not everywhere, but they still have visa requirements for a lot of places. And it's honestly, it's demeaning. It's demeaning for you to be able to say you need to prove yourself worthy of being able to travel here and there. Okay, it shouldn't be the case. It shouldn't be the case. It should be that people are people, and if they want to travel, if they want to go places, and they can afford to do it, and they conduct themselves appropriately, they should be allowed to travel. That's the way it is within Europe, and I think we've all benefited from that. I think for myself, a lot of the time I lose sight of the fact that the people that I might have discussions or conversations with in the US might never have left their own state. You know, and again, the idea of travel as being an enlightening thing and a thing that lets you understand cultures properly is 100% true. And the more barriers we put up to that, put up against that, the worse off we are, all of us. So yes, I am really, really happy to be confrontational with people nowadays because I have, quote unquote, the status of a European. And I just want somebody to challenge me because I'm from one of the countries that, you know, people won't say this, but they'll, if they're honest, they will. Bulgaria is still seen as kind of like, well, okay, we'll let you in. This is our club, but we'll let you in. You're not an equal member, right? So, and I see that also with my family. You know, my mother will have a dispute with somebody, like a service company or whatever, and she still has a really strong Bulgarian accent, even though she speaks English. And they'll treat her unfairly. They'll treat her improperly, right? And then I'll take over on the phone and I'll give them shit. And I'll give them shit in really good English with a really good understanding of the legal position. And they're like, I'm just going to go ahead and get my manager for you. We'll get that sorted for you. And I love to embarrass people like that because they shouldn't be demeaning people who, by virtue of nothing other than their birth, are disadvantaged.
Just to give our listeners a bit of context, what did you study at university, Vlad?
Law.
Therefore, you have a good grounding and a pretty good...
I studied law 3 times. I have a master's degree in law.
Very good. And that was in... You studied in the UK?
Yeah.
Therefore, technically, English law being the superior law compared to, say,
superior
Scottish
to
law.
what?
To Scottish law.
Yeah, well, in some respects. I mean, Scotland has some devolved powers. You set your own taxes. You take care of your own education system, which seems to be much better as well.
Sadly not. Going by the same education standards you were mentioning earlier, Scotland over the last 10 years has just jumped off a cliff with that regard.
Jumped downwards, not upwards?
Yes. Well, they tried going upwards and it failed miserably.
You know, oh my God, we got it. We got the Brexit metaphor. Okay? You're on a cliff, right? You're on a cliff, and you're like, I want to jump, so I want to go higher. But then gravity happens. And that's Brexit.
Yes.
I think yes.
I think we have it.
Brexit metaphor.
Let's just hope that there's a secret glide suit or parachute somewhere that will solve everything.
You can just jump exactly where you are, land on your feet, and be like, that would have been a dumb idea.
You did the same, Vlad, today with the iPhone, I believe, about intervening about the 3.5 jack, etc. So I think it's the same metaphor, right? Brexit and Apple.
Well, I mean, smartphones without 3.5 millimeter headphone jacks, we can live with. Honestly, we can.
Yeah, are we speaking about the Courage board there?
Yeah.
Okay, good.
Yeah. Well, look, I still feel like Apple removed the headphone jack from the iPhone 7 too early. I think that's a well-documented thing. At the same time, wireless headphone technology is catching up, and we're just gonna adapt over time. and it's going to be fine. And most headphones, I imagine, within a couple of years are going to be wireless in any case. So that's just a thing that will iron itself out. It doesn't really come close to Brexit, honestly. I would even say electing Trump doesn't come close to Brexit, because Brexit is a generational thing. Okay, Trump, worst case scenario, he leaves in 8 years. Okay, which is now 5.5, 6 years. It's nothing, blink of an eye. Brexit is best case scenario a 10-year project if it happens. Okay, real best case scenario, we fuss around with it for another few months. We have a referendum. People come back to their senses, and UK stays in the EU. Best case scenario for the UK, that is. For Europe, I think it might be better if the UK is gone. Because the people who actually want to do things that unify Europe are not going to have the UK always there and just complaining and saying, no, we don't want to do that. No, we don't want to do that, etc., etc. But yeah, Brexit is bad, but also fascinating and interesting. And I'm still kind of happy that I'm living through this moment in time. It's much more compelling television, if nothing else.
That's if people aren't watching this marathon-long episode of the Tech Travel Geeks podcast on YouTube.
Yeah.
I'm just joking about that. It's a pleasure having you on the show, Vlad. So I think we've talked about quite a few things, including Brexit. We'll bring that rant to Brexit before the end of the show again. I
no,
promise.
we won't. Please.
Don't worry, we'll make this happen.
You want to get rid of every final viewer we might have had, like people just despairing. Oh god!
No, this is going to be great. I can't wait to see the YouTube comments on this one afterwards, because I love engaging with our YouTube commenters. Some of them are just priceless. So Vlad, what earphones are you currently using?
Let's with headphones. I'll tell you. But before I do, this is a thing that we need to explain to, let's say, our US viewers or people who aren't familiar with UK culture. One of the, first of all, the UK invented shade. Okay, Americans talk about shade. The UK invented it, just didn't give it a name. And the UK flavor of shade is to use a neutral but somehow emotive term, right? So how was your trip to wherever? It was interesting, right? It was, exciting, can still be a neutral word. And now you say, YouTube commenters, they're priceless. Priceless. And that's one of the beautiful things, because you're not using direct words like I might use, right? You're not calling people terrible names. You're just shading. And it's the one aspect. There aren't that many aspects about English/British culture that I love, but this is one of those, because it's witty. It's a bit of dry wit. And
yes, we understate the obvious. Let's put it that way.
Yeah.
And on that note, I will have to ask you to say these words so that I can then edit them into the rest of the podcast. Could you say Shetland for us, please?
So, no, because you're going to edit half the word out.
No. Well, no. I need to take Shetland and replace the coprological term that you may have used a few times in the episode.
Shetland.
Thank you. I will use that.
Oh, do you have find and replace in your audio editing?
It's a very manual process. Despite my propension to automation in other areas of technology, I do an artisanal editing of the podcast. And I also need you to say frolicking ferrets, please.
Frolicking ferrets.
Thank you. Okay. So that's just to replace the words that would maybe get us reported as not being family friendly. We do also have listeners who listen to this podcast in their cars during long car journeys.
Hey, come on! It's not like I had a expletive-filled rant or anything.
No, you didn't. But it's just the occasional
expletive accented rant.
Yes,
rant.
But just in case we have listeners who have children in the car whilst they're driving, at this point between, I would say, London and Cardiff or Newport. 2.5 hour drive from London. Where will that get you? Most of the way to Manchester.
From South London to North London, maybe.
Yes, city driving. Yes, that's quite a trek. But that's great. Vlad, we've touched on most things.
Well,
even
I need to ask you a
avocado.
question. You asked me about headphones. What headphones I'm using
Yes.
right now? I'm using the Etymotic ER4XR. Yeah, ER4XR, I think they're called. These ones require lubrication.
What?
Well, it's because they have the free flange tip, and then Etymotic usually makes actually earplugs for people on work sites and whatever else, and the headphones are kind of a side business for them. So they go really deep inside the ear. They have the free flange tip, which does a lot of noise isolation, passive rather than active, and it's advised that you lubricate the tip before you insert them into the ear, because that's a more comfortable fit. Like you don't spit on them, like you don't get slobbering all over them, right? You just get.
So, do they have any recommended
little
products for that?
Yes, your mouth.
Oh, okay,
Like,
so
you don't put them in your mouth again.
yes.
You just use a little bit of bodily lubrication.
No, because I was just thinking that would be an awesome way of ensuring accessory sales for the life of the product.
Well, because look, I mean, I know it sounds gross, but then, do you want a fabricated product inside your ears? No, you want something that your body can accept and deal with, and your own spit is that. It's perfectly acceptable.
Do you think that is more acceptable than, say, avocado oil, such as the bottle I bought at Costco the other day?
Like, are you gonna put oil inside your ears? Like, you're making it weirder now. It's absolutely not weird to put a bit of spit on the tip of your earphones and put them in. Like I said, you need to be selective. I'm not saying spit on them. Yeah. Anyway, no, you should not oil your earphones before you put them in. That's gonna be nasty. Avocado oil. Why did you buy avocado oil?
Just to see what it's like. So apparently it handles heat at higher temperatures. It can be heated to higher temperatures and remain consistent within cooking. Much higher temperatures than, for example, sunflower oil or olive oil. So it's just an interesting thing. We do like expanding our culinary horizons in my home. So Candice, being a vegetarian, found this interesting. I suppose it's another thing that, depending on what the flavor is like, might be an interesting thing to pair with particular types of vegetables when stir frying them.
Maybe.
Vlad, and do you have any recommendation for headphones which are not very deep in your ear, like kind of like the iPhone headphones?
Yeah.
Not something that goes deep in. I don't like them. Any recommendation for wireless?
No wireless.
No wireless.
I'm just reaching over here because literally within reach, I have like 20 pairs of headphones.
That's why I'm asking you.
Wow, and fortunately, I do have these on hand. So first of all, these are like the Apple EarPods and AirPods in their fit, because they don't go inside; they just kind of rest inside the ear, but not inside the ear cavity. These are called the YINCROW X6. They're made by a Chinese company, which has something like 7 different brands of earphones. One of them is YINCROW, one of them is YINYOI, one of them is Revo Next, another one is K something, whatever, right? So these earphones, they cost, well, guess how much they cost?
$19.
£6.50.
Oh, wow.
AliExpress is the only place you can get them, and they ship them to you directly from China. Also, you shouldn't be afraid about how long it takes, even though they'll list something like 40 days for delivery. They come in like a week and a half, so it's reasonable. So these came to me from a friend, and their sound quality is terrific and just completely outdoes anything you might expect, even in like $20, $30, $40. But you will not find true wireless earphones that sit the way that these do, the way that you want them to. Just because people, when they design the true wireless ones, they like to design them with something going a bit further inside the ear, probably also to stabilize the bud so it doesn't fall out.
USB-C, because I don't have 3.5 on my Huawei's.
Well, that's what I'm saying. Get the HIDIZS adapter, the one that I mentioned earlier.
That's a good point. And how do you rate, as an audio expert, how do you rate the included Huawei white Type-C headphones that are included both in the Huawei Mate 20 Pro, last year in the Huawei P20 Pro, and this year in the P30 Pro?
I think it was back in the P20 Pro that I listened to them. So I can't tell you what they're like at this very moment in time. They were okay. They were just I can't get more excited than that. I think Samsung's bundled earphones, they carry the AKG branding, and they have kind of a nice sound, but not much happening in the bass region. They're kind of like your granddad's earphones. They're the Werther's originals of earphones. They're just extra smooth and sweet, and just not particularly, there's no zest, there's no tang to them. And headphones, they need to be able to both kick you in the head sometimes and then gently lull you to sleep other times. Like, that to me is a pair of headphones. Like, this is really weird. It's going to sound really weird, but the most expensive headphones in the world that I've tested, $3,000, $4,000. I know that their sound is true to life because I would listen to music with them and then fall asleep. And one of the things that prevents me from falling asleep when I'm listening to music from worse headphones is that there are unnatural tones. Like, this is my theory. Again, this is not the most scientific one, but I don't fall asleep with shitty headphones. Like, literally, that's a fact. It doesn't matter how tired I am, but give me some $4,000 HIDIZS and I know enough.
I remember you took me to the HIDIZS stand. I believe it was at IFA a couple of years ago. And that was eye-opening in terms of the music experience that they were doing. It is something that I'm guilty of. I don't think it's worth spending too much money on headphones.
I mean, I'll be honest with you. I've been looking at your Sony headphones and I've been silently judging you, so I might as well just make it.
Yes, these are a set of airport duty-free headphones that I bought just because I had to, and they were the cheapest.
For less than £30, right?
Yes, £29.
Damn, I nailed it.
Active noise
cancelling. Well done, me.
Too.
I'm impressed with myself. Come on, give me credit.
Well done, Vlad. A standing applause from the Tech Travel Geeks.
This was not planned. And I nailed it.
Yes. The reason I'm wearing these is these are the only 3.5mm ones that plug into my Amazon Basics microphone. So I'm rocking these, but I actually use a set of Bose QC35 II. Those are my preferred ones for travel, both for the active noises cancellation and the overall audio quality. They're a set of awesome headphones.
So I can actually wind us back to the beginning of this, talking about podcast gear. One of the first podcasts that I guested on with this Hype mic, I was using, like I say, I'm not kidding with you guys. I just live with headphones right next to me. These are the Sennheiser HD 300 Protect, and these are supposed to be studio headphones. And the idea with them is that they isolate external noise very well. They're supposed to, but they leak sound out. So when I went back to my recording, I heard the other person speaking coming out of the headphones and recording on my recording. So now I'm not using them, and I thought, well, in-ears are so much better for this purpose because I don't need precise monitoring while I'm recording. I just need to hear you guys speak. And that's where these Etymotic ones are great, because they're so deep inside my ears that hopefully no sound should leak out of them at all.
Indeed. The audio from you, both from the microphone and the lack of background noise, is excellent. So thank you for that excellent audio feed you're giving us.
But this is the risky thing. I reviewed the Hype mic, and I thought, well, as a bonus, I'm going to record the whole thing on the Hype mic. And that's where you're really risking it, because I can give you a headphones review, and I'm really conscientious about trying to give a realistic representation of what they sound like. But I could also bullshit, right? And you can't call me on my bullshit because you're not buying the $3,000 headphones. Like, as far as you know, I could just be coming up with complete nonsense because nobody's buying these $4,000 headphones unless you go to IFA like you did, right?
Yes.
So my credibility is not at stake because I'm not demonstrating the headphones at the same time as I'm reviewing them, right? So you just kind of have to trust me. And hopefully, if I do it accurately enough for long enough, people will trust me, and they do. But with that mic, I was like, okay, so I just laid out all these strong points about this microphone. Now I'm going to give people a recording. It better be bloody good because otherwise my review looks like shit.
We will try and keep it as true to the original in the edited version of the podcast. Yeah, but that's good. And what music do you listen to? What's your preferred music genre, and what type of music do you listen to?
That's a funny thing with headphones. The higher end your headphones go, the higher end your music tastes go. You do become a bit of a music snob. Previously, I might have listened to things like Bass Nectar, which is just terrible. Like, it's just and the name is going to mislead you. You think, oh, it's all bass. No. These guys do a ton of really irritating and aggressive treble, and the trouble is that they also listen to it when they're producing stuff. They listen to it with headphones that don't have great treble response, so then they just kind of put a little extra sizzle on top, and then you get really high-end headphones, and you hear all of that. Okay, you hear all of the imperfections and whatever. So when you do get high-end headphones, and the way that I do my reviews is, first of all, voices are the most realistic thing and the thing that you judge by, right? Because you instinctively sense when a voice is natural and when it's kind of the timbre isn't right, Then it's acoustic instruments. So nowadays, if I want to show somebody how great a pair of headphones is, I'm not going to play them some junky dubstep. I am going to give them Miles Davis. And Kind of Blue is too much of a well-known thing. So I do, like, my favorite is the one from Andalusia. If I can just look that up, it's Spanish music, and it's just kind of adapted to the trumpet, and it's really good. Let me just get that album there. Sketches of Spain. There we go. By Miles Davis, and that's terrific. Otherwise, I do still listen to a lot of electronic music, but again, kind of snobbishly, just picking the best producers, because there's a lot of trash in music production. There's a lot of amateur stuff, and when I say trash, it's not like people being sloppy. Sometimes you don't even have the equipment to sense that you've done something wrong with your tweaking, right? I literally had a pair of Mr. Speaker's headphones where I thought they had a buzz in the left ear cup, but it's actually the resolution of the headphones. So, as you might know, when you get one sound, you get a waveform. It goes up, it goes down, and then stops. And every pair of headphones has this imperfection where it doesn't immediately stop as soon as it should, right? It has a little bit of reverberation until the thing that moves to generate the sound comes back into place. Well, these $2,000 Mr. Speaker's headphones, they're called the Ether 2s. They do that stopping bit really quick, right? And if you do that with one note, that leaves silence for the second note. A regular pair of headphones, I'm just going to say it, a pair like you're currently wearing, is going to have ringing from the first note, which literally masks the second note. Okay, so and this is the idea of resolution with headphones. If you have everything precisely presented as it is in the recording, without the ringing, without the imperfections, without the distortion, you're also taking away some of the liquidity of the recording, right? Because distortion is sometimes the glue that holds the thing together. And
especially with pop music.
Yeah. Well, that being said, Halsey has really high-end production on her music. Really wide soundstage. I'm sure that studio is like millions of dollars worth of equipment to get all of that precision and imaging and whatever in detail. So not all pop music is sloppily produced, but some is. But yeah, so high-end headphones, they strip out a lot of that noise and they can make badly produced music sound bad, which is, hey, fair enough, right? But the things that they do with good music, with acoustic music, with voices, they like a friend of mine. Yeah, we're definitely doing a marathon podcast here. This is like a Joe Rogan experience right now.
No, this is good.
A friend of mine, I let her listen to $1,000 Denon headphones. These are Denon 9200 one time in a coffee shop. Okay. And for whatever reason, she hadn't come across a high-end pair of headphones previously. And I was just carrying them around because they're actually portable. And again, that HIDIZS USB-C adapter does the job, plugged into a Google Pixel. And she listened to them for a minute. And she took them off. She was just blown away. I'm not familiar with the effects of MDMA, but she is. And she was like, do you know what MDMA does to you? And I was like, no, tell me. And she says, it makes you hypersensitive to everything. So you experience everything with much greater intensity. And you're just much more in the moment and so on. And she's like, these headphones do that for me. And I completely agree with that. I am a bit more jaded nowadays. I have high expectations. So I don't start weeping the first time that I hear a high-end pair of headphones. But they can definitely bring you to that. They transport you. They take you out of your surroundings. They get you into the music, and it's the emotive quality of music that they really convey. Like it's a difference between, if you guys remember when Gordon Brown was making speeches, right? He was terrible at making speeches. Can we agree on that?
Not only because of his Scottish accent.
No, Scottish accent has nothing to do with it. Scottish accent is great. You can make some amazing speeches with a Scottish accent. We're not blaming Scotland for that one. It's just the man was not good. He was not charismatic, right? So there's a difference between listening to Gordon Brown delivering a speech and freaking Barack Obama delivering the exact same speech. The words can be exactly the same between the two, and one of them is going to leave you like, okay, that was a optimistic point of view, fine. And then the other one is like, yes, we believe in this. And that's it. I think it's that realism, it's the believability. That's the thing that makes high-end headphones worth it. And as far as I can, I do try and find ones that don't cost thousands of dollars, that get into that range of quality. And then I try and tell people about that. And so far, I haven't had anybody come to me and say, you told me these headphones were really good, and they weren't. For the most part, when I hear feedback, it's thank you for letting me know about those headphones. And I do feel, this is a final thing and I'll stop. I do feel like there's a challenge with headphones because you can't show their quality and greatness in any sort of visual way. And the web, more than anything, is still very visual. Like Huawei P30 Pro, I can tell you it has great nighttime photos. I can show you a slider between with it and without it, and you can be like, this is crazy. At the same time, I can tell you YINCROW X6, these $6 earbuds, $7 earbuds are going to blow you away, and you're going to be like, okay, I guess they will, but you can't see it, so you can't sense it. And if you can't hear it either, because you literally need the piece of hardware to understand.
Yes, no, that makes total sense, and that is something that I will actually go and see if I can get a pair of these. You said they were YINCROW S6?
YINCROW X6.
X6.
Yeah.
Yeah,
so excellent. I will order a pair on AliExpress. I too am a great AliExpress shopper.
Again, immigrants, man. I mean, I'm so good for the economy. The global economy depends on me.
Yeah, the Chinese economy thanks you for all your hard work at the Verge.
And honestly, and just to like give one final bit of travel advice to people, to feel like I've contributed to this podcast instead of used it as my platform to bitch about Brexit. I can only do my job outside of Bulgaria, and that's a point of disappointment for me. I tried at the end of 2017 to do my job from Bulgaria and receive review devices coming in from companies, and actually reviewing and receiving things into Bulgaria that cost anything more than $5 or $10 is an absolute nightmare. You literally have to go to the customs unit at the airport and plead with them, fill out a form, explain to them. They have no idea what the hell a review device is. They have no idea what it means that I'll receive this and then I'll send it back to the company. I'm not going to keep it. I'm not going to sell it. You know, they just don't believe it. And the custom system that we have in Bulgaria is pretty much designed to extract money out of people receiving things.
Yeah. Despite that, there are some very good Bulgarian news outlets covering the tech scene. I believe I was in China last year with.
I'm pretty sure they're getting airdrops by drone. Like somebody's coming from the Greek border, and I don't know, maybe even just launching it on a javelin or something, right? Just like firing it out of a gun. Hey, here's your new Samsung review device. Right, just pop it across the border. I don't know. Maybe once you grow accustomed to the bureaucracy, you know all the forms you need to fill out and so on, right? You adapt, and let's say something positive about the UK. It's frictionless. I receive stuff from the US, I receive stuff from China, and everywhere else, and especially being in London, things get here fast, and that's one of the advantages. Not that many, but one of the advantages of being in a megalopolis like this.
It is. Also, if you order something from Amazon in London, it's usually delivered same day, which is amazing.
Well, yeah, I've never seen the point of Prime actually being in London, because I always get the Super Saver delivery, which is like 4 to 5 days, and then I get it the next day.
Yeah, that's a good thing. I was recently shopping for a clothing iron for ironing my shirts, and I went to Tesco and Curry's, was shopping around, and then did a quick price check on Amazon. It was cheaper to have same day delivery of that item than it was to buy it in the shop.
So I have an idea, guys, and you may want to join me in this. We're about 15 minutes away from doing 3 hours. Can we do 3 hours just so we can say we did a 3 hour podcast?
We'll maybe need to do a little bit longer to make sure that after editing it happens. Though I think Shetland is longer than the coprological term, and I'm pretty sure frolicking ferrets is longer than the F word that was used a few times. So it's all good.
Look, I used it once. I'm pretty sure I used the F word once.
Yes. We'll see. But yes, let's keep on going and bring it back to Brexit. Or maybe not.
We've had enough of that.
Yes. So excuse me whilst I pour myself another Johnny Walker Select cask.
Wait. Pause for a second. You're in Scotland and you drink American whiskey.
It's not American. Johnny Walker is very Scottish whiskey.
Is it?
So yeah, Johnny Walker is a Scottish
This shows
blend.
how much I know about alcohol. Okay.
So it's a blend whiskey, very popular if you're a traveler in airports. The reason for that is
stop advertising it.
Blends are easier to keep consistent in terms of quality and in terms of flavor. So especially when traveling or shipping it, it's easier to do so and have that consistent experience.
Okay, whereas, I need to apologize to Scottish listeners and viewers. I literally know nothing about alcohol. Until like last year, I didn't know what an old-fashioned was or a Moscow Mule and whatever else. I just don't drink any alcohol. So no disrespect to the Scots. I really admire the tradition that the country has. And this is why I was taking issue thinking that you drink an American's whiskey in Scotland. It's like, if you're going to drink alcohol in that country, it damn well better be from the country. So
yes, having said that, I have recently finished a bottle of Japanese whiskey, which I really enjoyed. It was a white oak aged Japanese whiskey, and also a Canadian whiskey as well. And it's not just Scottish whiskey that's good. A good product is good irrespective of where it's made. I believe we had Ant Pruitt on the podcast in recent months, and he's a whiskey connoisseur, someone who does enjoy his whiskey, and despite living in the US, really enjoys his Scotch whiskey. So we've had these conversations before. But yes, as I said, I was just pouring myself an extra one to keep us going. So we can say it's 3 hours of the Tech Travel Geeks podcast with Vlad Savov joining us as a guest from The Verge. And taking us into Brexit philosophy, societal norms across the world, and a bit of consumer electronics around headphones, cameras, microphones, smartphones, presentation skills. So thanks for joining us, Vlad. Where shall we take this rabbit hole now?
Well, first of all, I think if you do show notes on the recording, you should mention to people that they're really great headphones tips at the end.
Yes.
Like, you gotta suffer through Brexit in order to find out about the great headphones.
So these are the good things we're looking forward to, is post-Brexit headphones.
Well, I can just review another pair of headphones. So this is, I should mention, this is the third pair of headphones that I'm demonstrating. I literally have them just on hand. This is the RHA True Connect.
A great
RHA,
brand made nearby.
Yeah, Scottish company. Love them to bits. I love them as a company. Do not love these headphones. This is the disappointment thing for me. It's why I haven't actually written up a review of them. They're not very good. Sound quality and connection stability are not very good. So I can't recommend the True Connect. But I can use that as an excuse to mention that when RHA sent me a pair of earphones, they sent with it a small, really cute bottle of Scottish whiskey in the package. Which again shows just how little they know me, because I do not drink. But I got a really nice photo out of that. Got a really nice photo, a really cute tweet out of it. And I think I gave the bottle to my uncle, which means he can't be biased, right? Because as far as I'm concerned, I'm not supposed to be receiving gifts. So that also means the Verge is one of the rare companies that doesn't accept any paid travel from companies, right? So it's one of my small frustrations that I can't accept when a Chinese or Korean company invites me over to their headquarters to do like a report from the development of a product. So for us, we can do it, but we need to justify it in terms of budgeting, right? And it's thousands of dollars. Whereas I would happily every single month go to Korea and wherever just to look in on how smartphones are made and developed and such. And I'm confident that I will not be affected by the fact that some multi-billion-dollar company spent a couple hundred, well, okay, $1,000, let's say, on me for travel. I know, well, I say I wouldn't be, but we have a strong policy and we adhere to it. And I think in the long run, it's for the better. It also means we don't waste time with kind of junkets.
Which is fair. Is that the reason you were not in Paris last week?
That's right. That's right. I had booked travel thinking that the event would be worth attending. But I got to see the phone in advance, and basically beyond seeing the new device, there wasn't that much value to attending the event. Like I say, Richard Yu needs to hire somebody to make the events a little bit more exciting, maybe. But even then, this is the other positive thing. We are not, because companies do this, right? Especially car companies, they make it impossible for you to cover their thing without going to their thing. Okay, so here's our new car safety technology. Come out to freaking Antarctica with us. Come out to Hawaii and we'll show it to you. We'll pay for your travel. And then it's literally, do I want to cover the new technology because it's interesting and then pay $3,000 for it? Or do I want to compromise my ethics and accept the car company paying for it? So for us right now, because cars are not prime content, we are adhering to our ethics policy, which is we pay for our travel, we pay for our accommodation. You just have to make the story worthwhile for us to spend the money on it. A lot of car journalists, a lot of tech journalists don't have that luxury. So
it's very expensive.
They can't afford to say, well, first of all, they can't afford to not cover the thing because that's their bread and butter. And there is no way for them to afford to pay for it themselves. And then they're at least a little bit beholden to the company in question. I know a newspaper journalist, a newspaper tech journalist, a friend of mine in the UK, he was asking me, where have you been recently? And I answered wherever the hell I was. And he just told me, we do not have a travel budget. Like 0. What is your travel budget? Nothing. Okay, so if a company doesn't sponsor you to attend an event, you do not go. And this again goes back to the point that we made long ago, I think it's still today, about advertising, right? If we're ad-funded businesses and advertisers don't want to spend big money on us because Google and Facebook own the big markets for ads, where is our actual revenue and income coming from? How are we supposed to fund what we're doing? And even things like Apple News Plus is a £10 per month subscription per person. That still doesn't make sense to me. Like £10 per person per month, but then hundreds of publications, which are going to get a fraction of £10 or dollars, right? Because still in the US, but it doesn't compute. You do not have the audience to be able to sustain massive newsrooms. You guys heard about The Correspondent?
Is it the new publication that's online only and has no office?
Yeah. Well, see, there you go. This is why you should work on your news sources. It does have offices, but they're in Amsterdam.
Okay, that's interesting.
The thing with The Correspondent was first it existed, I think, for a Dutch audience. It was based in Amsterdam, and then they did a crowdfunding campaign, and they raised, I think, $3 million via that campaign. And there was kind of an implication that they would have a New York office. The campaign was for them to do an English language version, and they recruited people, influential people, to boost up their profile and to encourage people to support them, right? Because the idea was that they're going to be a reader-supported publication and just kind of do something different, do a different business model, a different model about what to cover and how to cover and so on. And I think it's a good initiative. The controversy that rose with them is when it emerged that they're now going to have a New York office. And a whole bunch of entitled Americans were like, I just spent money on you guys to do an English language version, and you're not having an office in the most important city in the world, right? That's the attitude. And it's like, if you raise 3 million and you're going to spend money on a New York office, literally all of that money can just be spent on your office and on rent. Okay, not for 1 year, for a few years, but that's it. Like, you have no financial planning beyond the office. The office is the cost of at least 2 highly skilled employees, let's say, right? Highly experienced reporters. The expenses of actually running a newsroom are massive, and they're constant. They do not change. They're fixed. So
if anything, they go up.
Yeah. I mean, if you have an especially busy period of time, you might hire some extra help. You might hire dedicated photographers, whatever, right? There's always more that you can spend on in your news coverage, right? There's never, oh gosh, I have too much money. What do I do with it right now? And it's like, it's just an expensive business, right? Journalism is hands down an expensive business. You need people who are qualified. You need people who are experienced. You need to pay them well, right? You don't want dummies doing journalism because they get paid that lowly. You want people who are ambitious about their careers to be with you, to stay with you. It's an intellectually demanding job, which sounds like self-serving stuff. But then again, I'm not really a journalist all the time, right? I'm a journalist about 20% of the time. I'm a blogger about 50% of the time, a philosopher, and then a reviewer, and all of those other things.
And let's not forget, an avocado advocate.
Absolutely, I am. Even though, okay, I need to make the disclaimer. Apparently, avocado is quite demanding in terms of water consumption in order to be bred and harvested and so on. So it's not the most environmentally friendly thing. But god damn it, this is the one thing we have as millennials, okay? We don't have property. We have avocados. Do not take our avocados away from us.
I totally agree. And more importantly, you're making up for it by not having a car. Am I correct?
That's correct, yes. I have a step tracking watch. Withings Steel HR Sport. Let me demonstrate that as well. And it has the little readout of my steps in a OLED screen. Well, it's
So
upside
you've
down
only
now.
done 6,400 steps.
Yeah, I
today.
mean, I spent half my day podcasting for crying out loud.
Yes, and you've only spent 3 hours here on the Tech Never Geeks podcast.
Well, listen, 6,000 steps. If you can do that every single day, you're doing great. Okay.
Are you? I thought
Don't-
I thought it was supposed to be 12,000.
Yeah, good luck with that shit. Okay, like 12,000 is a lot, man. Especially if you're working from home, you need to work at it. And especially if you're in a country like ours where the weather is hateful towards human beings, right? You get rain and wind and sleet and whatever. Getting out to do these walks is a challenge. So listen, if everybody does 6,000 steps a day and just moves around, I think they're fine. There isn't actually much scientific backing to say 10,000 steps is some sort of golden mark for walking. I think just getting out of the house and getting fresh air is good enough, you know? But yeah, with this watch now, I am, so long as I'm not in a hurry to go anywhere, I am walking as much as I can. One of the things that I absolutely forbid myself to do is to order food delivery, whether it be from a restaurant or from a supermarket. So I force myself to walk out, go to the supermarket. It's 3,000 steps. So for my local Sainsbury's, there and back, it's 3,000 steps. That's something, right? It's a nice walk. Go and get some food, because yeah, the whole business of working from home, for the most part, has been a massive upgrade for me. It lets me be super efficient, so I don't waste time commuting, which in London is a huge drain on your time. It keeps me in actually better mental health, because physically being on the tube is probably bad for you in terms of oxygen supply, and it's absolutely bad for you in terms of seeing miserable faces around you. Right? Depression is infectious. Okay, that's not a fact, but it feels infectious. You know, bad moods feel infectious. You pick it up from people. Good moods are the same way, right? I go back to Bulgaria and I hang out with my grandmother, and anytime I'm with her, she's just so geeked about the fact that I'm there. It's all right. That everything I'm doing is terrific. You know, it's like, how are you, grandma? What can I get for you? Can I buy you something? Can I do some job for you? She's like, no, no, no. I'm super happy you're here, right? And it makes me
That's
happy.
nice.
Makes me happy to be in her company. Yeah, so not commuting is great. Saves me time. Saves me looking at miserable faces. But it does deprive me of contact like I'm having with you guys. This is why we're dragging out for 3 hours today. To actually have verbal conversation with people. So that's missing. So the social aspect is missing if you don't work at it, if you don't make an effort. And it's the physical exercise of actually having to go out and move around. You have to make the effort yourself.
That's a good way of doing it. And do you make similar points of doing that when you're traveling for work or for personal reason? Or is it just the natural curiosity that drives you to that?
Oh, yeah. Every time, even without the step tracking watch, anytime that I can make something into a longer walk than it needs to be, I do. So the Geneva Motor Show was just the most recent one. I did a couple of 17,000 step days just because I was like, let's do a couple of laps. Let's come back here and come back there. And I do inefficient paths through things just to get some extra steps squeezed in there, because it's good. It is honestly good. I feel like, and philosophy warning coming up right now, I feel like there are like 4 basic functions that humans are really well suited for. And they are eating, sleeping, procreating, and walking, right? Because this is why we have a butt, is to stabilize us while we walk and run. So the way that we live today, sitting in chairs, is perfectly unnatural. This is why there is no great chair for you. Sitting in closed off rooms without proper air circulation is also super unnatural, and affects us. Not getting enough sleep is again unnatural, and you're not going to get enough sleep in a city, because when I've gone out in London to try and do night mode photos, I realized it's daytime everywhere. Like, I need to get into some really dodgy areas. Like either go into a park when it's locked up, because then they don't have lights on, or go into somebody's garage without lights on to try and take a photo of something that isn't perfectly lit. So the streets of London are super bright at any time of the day.
Especially now that they've started changing all the street lights to be LED ones. It's
Well,
a noticeable difference.
And I mean, that's it makes the street safer, fair enough. It means that you can carry on whatever business you need to carry on at 3 a.m. in comfortable situations. But again, it deprives us. I think living in the city means you do not get a natural night experience. Never mind night sleep. It's a night experience.
And my favorite thing about my Huawei watch is the fact that it measures my sleep. And I've been super happy with that. I'm not sure if you've used any smartwatches which do that, but every morning I wake up, I'm like, oh, how well did I sleep? And it shows me actually, was it REM, was it light sleep, and was it deep sleep? And I don't care about any other functionality of my watch now. It's just this functionality that shows me if I'm improving or if my sleep is decreasing. So I agree with you. Sleep is definitely understated.
I'm using the Whitting's watch that I showed off. That does sleep tracking as well, and it's super accurate as well. And because it also tracks the heart rate, it illustrates. And for me, the really amusing thing is how my diet affects my sleep, and both diet and exercise. So if I've eaten more carbohydrates before going to bed, and it's like immediately before going to bed, my heart rate would be higher. But if I stick to what I'm trying to do, which is a low carb diet, and just do like eggs and avocados and fats and proteins, right, for the entire day, let's say, and I have a good amount of time between my meal and then going to bed, then I get a super low heart rate, and I get into much deeper sleep. It's much less disrupted. So exactly as you say, and I feel that as well. I feel more rested, and then I look at the readout on my app, and it says you slept better, and this is how you did it. And then I relate that to how I ate, and it just gives me a real insight. So yeah, like you, I'm not. I mean, I'm always in danger of being gamified by the numbers, right? And just be like, okay, more steps, more steps, more steps. And I've done that. I've averaged 15,000 steps a week. It's shit. Okay, I just spent half my day walking around like a jackass. I have no purpose in life. I'm just walking.
You mean you weren't playing Pokemon Go? You could have been so efficient by doing two things at once, Vlad.
I probably was doing 50,000 steps a day when I was into Pokemon Go, but that's long ago in the past now.
And you don't want to talk about that anymore.
It's not interesting. It got boring.
What about, are you not starting to prepare for the launch of the Harry Potter version by Niantic?
No.
not that you will admit.
No, I mean, I've just shown you that I literally live in a forest of headphones. I am not afraid of being recognized as a geek. And if I was a Harry Potter geek, I would admit to it, but I'm really not. It's kind of like Star Wars. I don't care.
Okay.
I shrug these things off. Same. I don't care. I care less about Star Trek than Star Wars, even. I just think Patrick Stewart is a great actor. That's all I got on Star Trek.
What's your favorite thing Patrick Stewart has been in?
Ooh. It might be some of the X-Men stuff, but at the same time, I don't really love any of those movies.
So yeah, I'm going deep here.
Yeah, it's a good question. Yeah, I wouldn't say it's the movies or the performances. No, it's the performances rather than the movies or the plays that he's been in that have stood out to me. I just like, if you want to talk about a person with gravitas, he's one of the first people that comes to mind. It's easier to say who I like, what movies I like with Ian McKellen.
Very good.
Who is the other half of that lovely duo. And that is Lord of the Rings, of course. I think those movies have aged brilliantly. I think I personally underrated them when they were first released, but they are kind of masterpieces. Like, if you And honestly, the best example for how badly they could have gone wrong is watching the Hobbit movies, right?
I totally agree on
Like
that
you
one.
actually realize, wow, so it is so easy to slip up and mistreat a classic of written literature, right? And just not do it justice. And the Lord of the Ring movies have done justice to the actual books, and that's an achievement.
And the saddest part is that Hobbit was the very first book that I read on my own without a request, as this is a book you need to read for school. It was the very first book I read on my own, and I had such high expectations, and I don't think I ever watched the whole trilogy of The Hobbit.
Yeah, I mean, it was if I recall correctly, the first movie was mostly illustrating how intolerable Bilbo Baggins is and how emo he is and how much of a scaredy cat he is. And
And
halfway
how
through,
awesome Andy Serkis is.
I mean, sure, but you know, the central character in your story is kind of an insufferable little whiny thing. And like halfway through the movie, I was like, I don't actually care for him to survive this. Like if he doesn't survive through the end of this movie, I'm gonna be kind of happy because then the complaining stops. And I'm sure that's not. I haven't read the entire book. I've read comic book version of The Hobbit, which obviously is like distilling it way down.
So just to clarify, did that comic book version have Tom Bombadil?
Oh gosh, I don't know. It's years and years ago when it was in Bulgarian, so
Okay.
I can't answer you on that one. But let's stick with the positive. Lord of the Rings, it was great. Like I can't think. If you think of the casting, right? I cannot think of replacing any actor in Lord of the Rings and feel like it would have been as good a movie. You know, Legolas feels perfect. Like you can't put in a different actor and get a better Legolas. You can't put in a different actor and get a better Aragorn or
Sean Bean, who dies better.
he's going to be remembered for his heroic deaths. Right?
Yes.
And
That's his legacy.
And a bit of a Yorkshire accent.
I suppose so. I'm not familiar with the Yorkshire accent.
They haven't reached you in London yet. Tut tut tut.
Well, I think people in Yorkshire just know that their place is better, so they don't bother coming down here. They just...
It is a lovely part of the world. Okay, no, that's interesting. So, Lord of the Rings, you're into Star Wars and Star Trek, not really. I would say if you get the chance. Now, Candice and I are lucky to have done this many years ago. We got to see Patrick Stewart on stage in London.
Yeah.
He did an adaptation. It's his own adaptation of Charles Dickens' Christmas Carol, and it's essentially him in a suit and 7 pieces of furniture. He does all characters from the Christmas Carol and does the whole thing. And apparently this is something he did to keep his sort of more classical acting alive whilst he was living in LA doing science fiction stuff. And so I'd say that's my all-time favorite Patrick Stewart performance, is when Candice and I went to see him live doing the Christmas Carol in London. And since you do live in London, Vlad, if Patrick Stewart ever does that again, I recommend you go and see it, because you obviously appreciate his acting, and you would be amazed to see how he does everything on his own.
I mean, my greatest sin as a Londoner is not going to the theatre enough. I do very rarely.
I would say yes. That's one of the highlights of London. Often traveling to London for that, it's one of those things. You're lucky to be there. Take the chance, go and see things. Maybe not everything's perfect, but some shows are worth seeing live.
No, I agree. I think live performances, whether it be music or theater, have a thing about them that can't be conveyed in all of these recorded, prepackaged versions. Like you can get close to it sometimes, but it's not the same.
Yeah,
and
I went. Sorry.
No, you go, Lukasz.
I went to see Hamilton last year, end of last year, I think. in London, and it was such an experience. I just loved it. And in Edinburgh, we have some theater, luckily. We don't have any music, and especially my kind of music, the heavier kind. Edinburgh is really under, missed by all those. So we have pop, we have Spice Girls and Kylie Minogue this year, but nothing for metal. Here's Matteo smiling. But theater, we have quite good musicals, but we've not had Hamilton. Did you get to see Hamilton yet, or
no.
Are you planning? I would recommend. It's quite an experience.
But I am a bit allergic to musicals. Because
missing out.
Well, because if it's a performance of singing, fair enough, right? I don't even need instruments. Like, if you're just gonna sing, if you're gonna do an opera thing, let's do it. I'm down. I know that there's a lot of skill in singing, song and dance, fine. If it's gonna be a performance of a theatrical play, something with a narrative to it, let's do that. But musicals are always like, we're gonna do both, and I'm like, no, you're not, because that doesn't work. Okay, like the moment I get invested in your characters and they start singing, and I'm like, oh,
frolicking ferrets.
Yes. Dingleberries.
Yeah, I would recommend trying Hamilton. I listened to the soundtrack for like 2 months afterwards. So yeah, I think it's worth it.
And on that musical note, I think it's time we wrap up the Tech Travel Geeks podcast.
I think so too.
Vlad Savov, as always, it's been a pleasure chatting to you.
You guys have spent my entire podcasting budget for the year.
We should do this more often, and I think there's space for us to host and set up a philosophy and politics podcast where people are very British and respectful of each other and don't shout too much. What do you think, Vlad?
That would actually be unlike the British, because the House of Commons is full of shouting and disrespect.
But out with the House of Commons, it's quite civilized. We've gone through this sort of generational shift and potentially a lot of acrimony without any actual bad things happening. We should
do an immigrant podcast.
That sounds great.
Yeah.
There's a lot of us.
Just because I mean, it's the end of the podcast. Nobody's paying attention anymore. But I just think we're better people. Like, just be better people.
but my tricolor is better than yours.
It's the same, goddammit. I think that's the point. Yes.
Okay, then. So on that note, Vlad, where can people find you and your thing? Your writings.
Find me in this podcast, because it will never end.
Yes, this is an ongoing 3-hour saga. This is episode 1 of.
People can just go off, have a lunch break. It's fine. We're still going to be able to come back.
Our work in progress title for this is the first installment of the Lords of the Immigrants podcast.
No, Does that sound good? Is bad. No, the Immigrants are a proletariat organization. It has a flat organizational structure, so no leaders, just collaborative, cooperative, communitarian.
Dear sir, I do not agree with your social construct. I wish to secede.
Tough shit. You're an immigrant. You're stuck with it. Okay. You want to secede? Go back to Italy, and I'll come join you, because you guys have amazing food.
So
yes, you can find me. You can find me on theverge.com. It's a website on the internet, and twitter.com/Vlad Savov.
Excellent. So Vlad Savov, we will link to this in the YouTube comments on the Tech Travel Geeks podcast. So far, the longest episode. Lukasz, how about you? Lukasz, how about you? Where can people find you on the internet?
On Tech Travel Geeks. So YouTube, mostly editing videos and filming stuff. And on Twitter, Elsriga. You can find me there. What about you, Matteo?
So just the same as you, techtravelgeeks.com, the Tech Travel Geeks YouTube channel, where I am the voice of opinionism for Tech Travel Geeks. Lukasz does a great job of editing our videos. On the Tech Travel Geeks YouTube channel, you can find all our latest content about the Huawei P30 Pro, about the Pocophone F1, and more importantly, our music video, which highlights the main theme of MWC 2019. Well done to DJ Lukasz for editing that for us. We will sign off this version of the edited episode with that music track. Again, thank you to Vlad Savov for joining us. I'm on Tech Travel Geeks and on Twitter as @Todoleo. And we will be back with another episode soon. Our editing schedule is not perfect at the moment, and this 3 and a bit hour podcast will be quite a challenge to edit. But again, thanks to Vlad, thanks to Lukasz. Good night, everyone.
Thanks, guys.
Cheers.